Their mayor is Muslim. Their bagels are Jewish. New York City is alive because the Knicks won in 5. Today, we are talking about the NBA champs and what modern team building lessons can be gleaned from the new title team. But stick around, because we are also talking all things NBA draft for the Denver Nuggets. Who should they take? Should they move up? Should they be drafting at all? We explore these questions and more today. Stay tuned. Happy Wednesday and welcome to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean, here with host of Court Talk with CT and Nuggets Twitter's resident draft scout, CTFazio. How are you doing today, CT?
Hey, Grace, doing well. Thanks for having me back on the show. It's about that time to talk drafts, so looking forward to break down some prospects and talk Nuggets with you.
Definitely that time of year, and I'm happy that we were able to fit into your no doubt busy schedule as you are in high demand, producing probably the most prolific draft boards within sort of Nuggets media sphere right now. And you also seem to have a knack for at least having an idea of the few players that the team tends to hone in on every year. So in addition to sort of the wish casting that we might be doing on today's show with the draft, we'll also probably have a decent idea of who Denver is actually thinking about taking. So programming notes, we have an elephant of a show today. Seriously, we are talking Knicks, we're talking Nuggets, we're talking NBA draft. So we're going to jump right in. But before we do, please do us a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps us out with the algorithm as we try and grow this channel during the off season, which for some reason is actually some of the most popular time for the channel. All right, first bit of news, and it's gonna like dovetail into our first big segment here. The New York Knicks are your 2026 NBA champions. Jalen Brunson is Finals MVP. They're doing their parade Thursday, tomorrow. I was watching the Knicks starting, I think it was all the starting 5 on Good Morning America, and OG looked super, let's just say not sober. So they are definitely enjoying themselves, and it was kind of reminiscent of just like my first kind of summer as a Nuggets fan, like kind of enjoying the, post-championship afterglow too. So that's been, kind of fun. It's a really exciting time for the Knicks fan base right now.
Definitely for sure. I mean, out here in Jersey, New York, everywhere you go, whether it's a restaurant or out in a public setting, you have everyone watching the Knicks games and rooting on the team when they were in the finals. So it's definitely a big deal over here on the East Coast in the Tri-State area that the Knicks won after what was it, a 50 plus year drought. So it's been a long time coming.
Was it 53?
53, I think.
Yeah. That's crazy. And they hadn't been to the finals since, was it 99? And that's obviously like nothing to most NBA teams, but the Knicks are a legacy franchise. Like they're definitely like, if they're not LA or Boston in terms of just the legacy there, but they're like the next tier down in terms of being like the big media market legacy franchise team. And for them to have gone that long without even having the chance at the title, and then to finally get there, and then I don't believe the Knicks were favored in the finals necessarily, even though a lot of analysts thought they had like a decent chance against the Spurs. But when you're going up against a 62 win team with a generational talent there who was having like quite a run of his own in that playoffs, you go there and you're like, well, this is the opportunity, and you never know if you're going to get back there again. And maybe Nuggets fans know that better than anybody. But they were able to capitalize and take advantage of that opportunity, and now they get to hoist that trophy. I want to talk a little bit about Jalen Brunson's series. Just I had some like residual notes about his Finals MVP, not necessarily being in question, especially after he left no doubt with his closeout game performance in Game 5. But I want to talk a little bit about why Jalen Brunson was my Finals MVP pick even before Game 5. he obviously is the lead on-ball creator. He was averaging, 30 points per game. I think even before game 5, very inefficiently, might I add, but nobody was particularly efficient among the primary creators on either team. You had some really efficient role players in Dylan Harper and OG Anunoby, but those are not necessarily the guys um who you would kind of be on the short list for a finals MVP, although OG had sort of had his own kind of elite of the elite role player case for that throughout the series. But Jaylen hit game winning or game sealing shots in both games 1 and 2, even after highly inefficient outings, but helped get the job done in the clutch. And I think that's really important, obviously. Dropped 36 in New York's for New York in the second half of game 4 as they came back from the 29-point deficit, the most improbable comeback in NBA Finals history. I think he ended up a plus 30 in the second half of that game. And then obviously the thing that was the nail in the coffin for anybody else's Finals MVP case was the 45 points that he scored out of New York's 94 points in their game 5 on the road in San Antonio, again versus a 62-win team. Against a team, by the way, that had started for the 5th game in a row, all 5 games in the series, the Spurs had a double-digit lead coming out of the first quarter, right? He was really determined to get New York that win and not give the Spurs any life. And you don't want to give a team that talented any life. After that, it's like, well, you just have to win a road game. And then you're back home in game 7. You never know what can happen there. And as somebody who wanted the Knicks to win this series, even though I'm not like necessarily a Knicks fan, I was kind of nervous of like, I don't know, anything can happen these days. So even though most teams don't come back from down 3-1 in the finals, like it has happened before. And it seems like the last 10 years of the NBA has been a decade of bucking trends. So I didn't even want to, leave the possibility for that happening. So I personally appreciated Jalen Brunson for my distant agendas. I want to talk a little bit about how New York built their roster here, because I don't think that people really necessarily appreciate like how this Knicks team was built. So they traded for Josh Hart from the Portland Trailblazers, signed Jalen Brunson in free agency. I think the Brunson signing came first. That was the whole hoopla with the Dallas Mavericks. Traded for OG Anunoby, traded for Mikal Bridges. F them picks is what the what the fan base is saying right now, not necessarily a year ago. Traded for Karl Anthony Towns. And at some point in there, Jalen Brunson took a pay cut's not quite the right word, because he ended up signing a sub max extension on his previous salary that he got when he first signed with the Knicks, instead of waiting to sign a full veteran like 30% max extension, which is what he would have been eligible for, because he's not quite at the super max eligibility just because of the years of service yet. But anyway, it was less money than he could have gotten if he'd waited a year. But I talked about this even at the time that he signed that. I think that Jalen had a legitimate case to say like this wasn't necessarily about like me taking a pay cut. It was like security, and like players sometimes choose to, especially if you're not like the tippy top of the league guys that will always get that money like no matter what. We've got plenty of cases of those where you're like, that team offered what extension, but then it's like that's your franchise guy. When you're not that like top 5, top 6 guy in the league, for sure, sometimes you'd rather take the security of like, I'm going to take the long-term like generational money that's on the table. But it did end up like he obviously would have, in another universe, if he had waited, would have qualified for more money. And it ended up giving New York the flexibility to not have to choose between financial flexibility and building out the roster. So what Jalen gifted New York was not having to make certain choices that other teams do. having been a player that was delivering elite production and impact on sub-elite money, right? Sort of, I mean, I think he's making around what MPJ makes right now in terms of percentage of the cap.
40 million?
Not even. So a little bit less than that.
Wow.
It's like 22% of the cap. And that obviously gave the Knicks the ability to trade for Mikal Bridges because they had to aggregate salaries in order to get him, and you can't do that if you're over the second apron. That was a big thing. And now it's probably gonna give the Knicks the option of whether they're gonna go over the second apron or not. I don't know what James Dolan is planning to do there, but in terms of creating the team that they had this year to compete for the title, that was huge. And while I have my qualms and concerns about what the new financial restrictions that were voted on by both the Players Association and all 30 owners in the new collective bargaining agreement means for the bargaining power of particularly players that tended to be favored in past iterations of the CBA, that is the guys just under the top, as in like not the MVP candidates, but all-stars. Because you could always say like, well, your legacy matters here. And if you want to help out the team to be able to build out around you, maybe you should take a pay cut. I don't know if that's going to happen more and more often, but these are the kinds of examples that give me pause about that. But it like that the other side of the sword is obviously that it can't be ignored how important that was for the Knicks, for Jalen Brunson to have done that. Do you have any comment on that, or how the Knicks built out their team, and in particular how it, like, this was not a draft and develop situation?
No. No, this was a long, I would say, culmination of moves that had finally arrived to them winning a championship. I actually believe Mitchell Robinson was the first player to like be a part of this iteration of the team, even before Leon Rose as an executive had joined. Because I think the first summer that Brunson had came over, I think Leon Rose had taken over the franchise, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that, but I know Mitchell Robinson was first as far as like he was drafted by the prior regime, and then Leon Rose came into the mix, and then Brunson was signed after that. So this was a long culmination of moves that had finally arrived to this point. But with the Knicks market, and like you said, with Brunson taking a pay cut, they were able to be aggressive with trades. And luckily they had that familiarity with some of the guys that they brought in, with Bridges and Hart, and even 2 summers ago where they traded DiVincenzo. That was a move where they're obviously very close with DiVincenzo, with all of them going to Villanova together. They traded him, who was a close teammate of theirs and someone who was very productive for them in getting reaching playoff heights that they competed together. Getting Karl Towns in that trade, which obviously I think was a big piece and move that was able to catapult them to winning this finals, as far as the matchup against Wemby. But with the Knicks, it's just, they really didn't, it wasn't a drafting situation. Like you said, they had a guy in Brunson that they wanted to get, and they said, we're going to build around Brunson. And then, the moves ensuing for that will kind of factor in the fit there. But I think they have a really good roster as far as their surrounding talent around Brunson. Their skill sets really amplify Brunson's strengths and also protect some of his weaknesses as well. Is this a team where I think it's going to be like a dynasty? I mean, probably not, but I think they could get another title next year. I think they could be right back in the hunt for it. But we're in this era now where it's just a lot of parity, different champion every year. And I think the Knicks took advantage of the window, but I think they were very, very deserving of this championship.
Yeah, and to your point about the different team builds that win titles in this era, I just kind of wanted to go through a couple of the examples since the Dynasty Warriors here. Raptors, obviously, they build through the draft and then use that kind of the draft capital and cachet to trade for that last star piece in Kawhi Leonard to get them over the hump for one season, but they got a championship out of it, right? That's more than a lot of other franchises can say.
The Knicks traded RJ Barrett, who was their number 2 pick, for
and Emmanuel Quickly. Yeah, they kind of sold high on particularly IQ And they definitely did on DiVincenzo as well, as being like to be part of the package for Cat. And to their credit in understanding how this new CBA was operating, they could take advantage of the financial situation that the Wolves were in. Is we have our ideas about how Tim Conley might have felt about Cat in the first place, but the main driver for that trade was moving off of money,
Right.
and trying to get some degree of like roster flexibility there as well. And the Knicks were able to take advantage of the situation that the Wolves were in to say, because like otherwise you wouldn't necessarily be trading your up until Ant kind of emerges, like your kind of franchise player, guy who's on a supermax, has made an all NBA teams guy for Julius Randle, a borderline bench starter role player in DiVincenzo, even though he's really good. And then
Right.
like, was it one draft pick, I think, was in that trade?
I think so.
Unless the point is like, well, we're also trying to salary dump here. And then obviously immediately after that, you get the Lakers, who signed LeBron in free agency. They did trade a lot of their young talent and draft picks for AD, but then they fill out the roster with a bunch of other veteran free agents, mercenaries, on the way to getting their bubble ring in 2020. The Bucks, they do draft and develop their like core kind of group of guys when it comes to Giannis and Chris Middleton. And I think, was DiVincenzo also drafted by Milwaukee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then they, fill it out with Drew and Brooke to kind of complete that picture with some high level role players around those guys. I don't even know how to characterize the Warriors 2022 ring, to be honest, because you've got Steph and Draymond and Clay that are like, they're like long-term draft and developed guys at that point. But they were going through this like two timelines phase. But outside of like Jordan Poole in round one, the main contributors to that ring were more of the like back end vets. So like that's like a whole, that Warriors roster build was like a whole chimera of like every kind of team building sort of methodology there. And obviously having traded that was the last time, and maybe the only time in the last, my gosh, I can't remember another time in the last decade that the Warriors traded a first round pick for anything, but it was for Andrew Wiggins, and then they got a ring out of it. That team really likes to hold on to their draft capital. Obviously, the next year, the Denver Nuggets win, and they largely built through the draft, and AG was the big trade to help be that last like championship piece to complete the picture for them there. The
KCP.
Celtics and KCP as well. Yes. Celtics draft their two core dudes. They traded for Derek White. They were really aggressive in their trades for Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. They also had added Al Horford in years past, who was another really good vet for them. And they were able to get that championship out of those guys, and then move on from them a year and a half later, basically. And then obviously last year with Oklahoma City, you have like a very much built through the draft team, but it's not like they used their own picks. They traded for their franchise star in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander while he was still on his rookie deal, which was a big deal for them, and also got a ton of draft picks, many of which became his co-stars in OKC's endeavors too. So you just have a wide variety in how teams that have been successful in getting a championship over the last decade have gone about building their rosters. And I wanted to kind of elaborate on that because it's very clear that there's not just one way to build a successful championship team. And because we haven't had any repeats in now 8 years, it's clear that there's no one successful way to be a dynasty necessarily. I will say on my I was thinking about this earlier today. I do think the closest thing to dynasties now will be those teams that will be kind of constantly in kind of conference finals contention. Even like you might make the finals, you might win again, who knows? But teams like, Boston kind of was for most of this decade, where you're like, they've been in the conference finals, 4 times since 2020?
Right.
And I think that the next team that's like that for right now will definitely be OKC. And even if they don't make the conference finals, they're always going to be like right there. Like it's surprising. It'll be surprising when they don't, just like it's surprising when Boston doesn't make the conference finals in the East. But I think that's just kind of the bar right now in the age of parity. And so there's no like one answer to building a sustainable team other than getting your star players to take deals.
Definitely.
Plant some trees.
Yep. And I think we'll probably get to this in the coming segments, but for me now it's more about skill sets. Especially now physicality is probably a big buzzword that's been going around as far as the added kind of value on both ends of the floor, particularly defensively, wearing teams out at the point of attack. I think that's probably just more so for me, like moving forward as far as building a contender. Like you said, it's a new probably team every year that we're seeing in that hunt for the title. But I do think constantly now moving forward that I think the Knicks and I think the Spurs showed it as well. OKC did too, but they were unfortunately, or fortunately for people who don't like OKC on the Nuggets show, that they, were obviously missing 2 of their guys. OKC were missing Jalen Williams and then a couple other players
AJ
as
Mitchell
well.
was, I think, like maybe an even bigger loss for that particular series.
Right. I just think at the moment there's a physicality threshold that you need to withstand on both ends of the floor. And
you kind of can't do that if you're missing any horses, regardless of what they bring to the table, just because of the physical toll that the game takes on people, on players now.
Definitely. And that's why it was a shame 2 years ago when the Nuggets lost to OKC. I mean, Aaron Gordon is probably their most physical player that they have, and he was out. Like the Nuggets couldn't have a chance to really even compete in that last game. So, but yeah, I think moving forward, just skill set wise, that's kind of the new meta.
Yeah. All right, then let's get to the Denver Nuggets. Before we get to draft talk, I want to talk a little bit about their elimination and what it says to you about your evaluation of how the team was this year and how the team is going to be moving forward. So obviously Denver was eliminated from the playoffs in round 1. CT, you actually did an offseason pod right after Denver got eliminated.
Yep.
It was really good. I highly recommend everyone go check that out. It's relevant even today because CT has weaves a lot of his team building philosophy and culture building philosophy also. I don't know, for anybody that hasn't been is newer to the pod, we have CT on pretty periodically, and one of the things that new viewers of the show might learn about you is that you also coach middle school basketball. So you have both that sort of scout's eye and also a feel for what it means to kind of coach guys up and at least deal with personalities and do that part of coaching too. I want to start off this conversation by setting a baseline about Denver's elimination that CT and I agree that the single biggest factor in Denver losing round 1 was Jamal and Jokic not playing up to their standards. Jokic sucked for half the series. Jamal sucked for the other half. If they play better, Denver advances, and that can't actually reasonably be questioned. We're going to touch on what that dynamic actually means for the future of the team in the latter part of this segment, but I wanted to turn some of our focus to the build of the team around them because it seems the most likely configuration of the team for next year, based on all reports, will include both Jokic and Jamal. Of course, unless we get another surprise trade this summer like we did last year. So on the topic of Denver's elimination, in your pod, you mentioned that the Wolves turned Denver into a jump shooting team. What should Denver do to counter that? Do you guys just need to make their shots as they had all regular season? What should Denver do about that?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of different factors. The Nuggets obviously this year their offense was historic as far as the metrics were concerned in the regular season
Hmm.
compared to the playoffs. And admittedly, I was a bit lower on the Nuggets as most people, whether that's fans or media or just people in general. I thought their team build in particular was not really made for the playoffs to go at least to advance further than the Western Conference Finals. And I say that because the moves that they made the past offseason were kind of made with the fact of this happened in the past, so we can replicate that. Bruce Brown in particular, who I think actually had a pretty good regular season for Denver. But again, the Nuggets tried to turn him into a backup point guard, which again had moderate success or pretty good success at different sects of the season within their title run. But they tried to replicate that this past year, as saying, you know what, we don't need an actual point guard or a creator type off the bench. We'll just take Bruce and see if he can replicate that again, which we saw in the playoffs. And unfortunately, with Bruce's output, he didn't play as many minutes as probably in years past. I think he averaged like 3 points a game in the playoffs. It's just in this kind of new era of basketball that we're seeing with physicality threshold and more creation on the floor. I just think Bruce's skill set was not additive as far as what the Nuggets needed as far as playing beside Murray and Jokic at this point in where the Nuggets are at as a team perspective. Um, and that's why I was pretty defensive of Russ last year, even though in the playoffs against OKC there was definitely another set of issues as far as teams just didn't really care to guard him on the ball, and teams would just switch pick and rolls with him and Jokic and kind of mitigate that pick and roll that we saw that was so successful in the regular season to last season. Um, the Nuggets just didn't have enough creation on their roster this past year, and that's kind of moving forward. If they're looking to compete again, I think they have to realign their perspective on skill sets on the team. The team just can't rely on Jokic and Murray to create all of the offense. I think that's overbearing, number one. But also, too, this we just saw in the playoffs now. Look at a team like the Knicks where Brunson's their main creator, obviously. But you had different guys come in that were able to kind of create for themselves at different portions of the series. Clarkson came off the bench. He didn't play a lot, but he was able to get you a bucket or two if you really wanted to have him come in the game and he can score for himself. Alvarado came in the game in what was it, game 4?
Game 4, yeah.
In New York, and he helped win them the series. Well, helped win a game in the series. And he's not a creator type, but he's someone who can break the paint in certain portions of the game. And obviously, look at the Spurs, different set of as far as roster composition with their picks being very high up in the draft. Dylan Harper was a guy this year who played off the bench, more so of a guy attacking closeouts in a tilted floor than actually setting up the offense like we saw Fox was and Castle at certain points. But he was someone who actually could break the paint and create a shot for himself.
And in particular, was incredibly good at attacking a tilted floor, as you like to say. So, like, once the advantage has been created, even moderately, then that's a player who can capitalize on that beyond having to take a jump shot. I just want to hone in on this. So, what you're basically saying is that Denver, at least offensively, one of their biggest problems is that they lack more secondary on-ball creation. And that is one of the things that has held them back from being able to counter what teams do to, quote unquote, turn them into a jump shooting team. I actually agree with you on that, but I want to really drill down on why that is. Why is it that a team that has more creators and guys who can attack a tilted floor will end up taking fewer jump shots necessarily? Like, why is that?
Well, I think in Murray and Jokic's case for the Nuggets is that McDaniels and Gobert had such an effect on them playing out 2v2 is that Murray and Jokic couldn't create optimal looks like we saw in the regular season where the Nuggets offense was so potent. But their skill sets they had other than Murray and Jokic, and obviously Gordon and Watson were out in the series, so that's definitely a factor, even though I still think the Nuggets lose the series fully healthy. And if the Wolves were fully healthy and the Nuggets were fully healthy, I think the Nuggets still lose the series. Just for the fact that the Wolves were well equipped to guard the Nuggets and that we saw in, I would say, the 2 playoff runs after the title, the Wolves series where they lost in 24, and then against versus OKC as well, it was still the same iteration of team. They just swapped out MPJ and put Cam Johnson in his role, and then they took away Russ and added Tim Hardaway Jr. and Bruce Brown off the bench. And there was still the same kind of allocation of skill sets where if shots aren't going in, what else can you bank on as like a baseline in order for if everything goes wrong, which basically everything did go wrong in the Nuggets series, what else can you bank on as far as a counter?
There was just no other dynamic to go to.
Right.
One of the things that that Will and I have talked a lot about on this podcast here and why we want more secondary creation on this team is that the best players on the team get no respite right now in terms of having somebody else create something easier for them. Right. They have to do all the creation for somebody else. And here's the thing about that is your best players should get some of the easiest stuff because ideally, like at least like theoretically, they would capitalize on the easy stuff even better than anybody else would. So if somebody else could just like create, like if somebody besides Jamal could like create more floaters for you, I don't think that Jokic actually got that many floaters in the Wolves series. That was something that
he didn't
saw
break
a lot like,
really in the series.
Or Jamal being able to take more catch and shoot looks because he gets to play off the ball. Right. But that just didn't happen in that series. And I think there's a variety of factors for that. Part of it, I think, is the roster crunch, and we'll get to some of the more like mechanically, like why is it that even compared to the regular season, we saw such a decline in the ability of Jamal to play off the ball in that series. Okay.
Murray had his highest usage in that series as well compared to all of his playoffs performances. Yeah. And I think that was honestly the Wolves had made that by design because the Nuggets didn't have anyone else. The Nuggets didn't have anyone else to run offense other than Murray and Jokic. Right. I mean, Cam Johnson in like the last 2 games kind of was able to break free a little bit as far as like getting, running some offense as far as like pick and rolls and things like that. But even still, though, it wasn't enough to really sway the series.
When you don't have other options, you make it easier for your opponent to dictate. Right. And I think that's what happened. Right. Because the whole point is like, well, they countered and you have to be able to counter back if you want to set the terms. All right. We'll get back to the creation question, but I want to touch on what you said about the trades that the moves that Denver made last summer. The last time we spoke on the pod was exactly 3 days before Denver traded MPJ for Cam Johnson. You mentioned in your podcast episode, Denver really missing MPJ on the glass, especially him being this 6'10" guy at the small forward position for the most part in Denver. But listening to that, and kind of going into this past season, I thought it's really nice to have a 6'10" small forward. It definitely like gave Denver like a little bit of margin for error when it came to how they performed on the glass. But that's a luxury, right? Nobody else has a 6'10" small forward on their team except the Rockets when they go like uber big with like Jabari at that position. Denver was basically a normal sized team at that point without MPJ until AG went out, and then slightly undersized after that. But other teams operate slightly undersized also, right? I mean, San Antonio was starting Julian Champagnie at power forward. Is Denver a team then that can only operate when everything is just right? Do they need to have this overwhelming size advantage just to have a chance at playing par on the glass? Or am I being unfair because it was literally the Wolves, right? One of the biggest teams in the league, and in particular the team that has, in my opinion, the best aggregate collection of front court talent in the league outside of just, like one position.
For sure. And I think with if you really compare the 2 series, like the Wolves first series versus this past one, they just swapped out Towns and Randall. Yeah. And Towns was a big factor in that series versus Jokic.
Yep.
Defensively. that he was able to bother him, and we saw that against Wembanyama in this
Exactly.
finals as well,
Yeah.
where he really swayed the series defensively. You know, and that was something with Towns in years past, is that was a really a weakness for him was his defense, but he really improved on that end of the floor, and he's able to really make up for it with his his height, and especially the shooting on the other end, where he's able to stretch offenses out, play 5 out. Um, but yeah, I think with Denver in particular, just mainly like I said, it's more so of just like a skill set problem that I think they have. And when you talk about the MPJ trade, I really wasn't like thinking that it was a slam dunk move for Denver. I know a lot of people, um, had thought it was a big win for Denver. For me, I think trading MPJ at his lowest value, and we'll probably get to this coming up as well. And I think this actually factors into Christian Brown this summer, which I don't think they should trade him, because it's going to be the same factor, maybe worse, about attaching assets or players to get off of Christian's contract, especially after the first year
That they just created.
that they just created, right? So I think last offseason, actually, the moves were not as, I would say, optimal as far as Denver's long term outlook, and maybe the short term as well, comparatively to that. Um, and my issue with the trade was more so, again, Cam Johnson this year, I think, was in the playoffs. So the last 2 games was pretty good, but regular season wise, there was a lot of ups and downs. I think it took a long time to acclimate to the offense that the Nuggets were running, which I kind of thought was likely, just because of the way Denver plays. It was more so that Denver had to attach a pick to MPJ to get off of his deal, and it was the 2032 pick it's an incredibly valuable pick.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to trade MPJ, who I think is a good basketball player, as we saw this year, I think he recouped a good amount of value in Brooklyn. Whether you think he's whatever option he could be on a title team or whatever moving forward, I think that's besides the point. It's more so that they traded one of their last valuable assets for basically, at the most, a net equal value of player. Where if you were going to use that pick, then that pick should have been used as an asset to get like a clear cut difference maker. Unless I'm valuing that asset wrong, but
I actually think I think that's a good point, but I think there are two ways that you can look at the pick. And for me, I want to open up the universe of kind of acceptable outcomes there, to where, like, if your goal was a salary dump, which it was clearly in Denver's case, if your goal is a salary dump, then make it an actual salary dump.
you
As
want Zeke.
in, yeah, like Zeke should have been in that deal,
Right.
because that pick is that valuable. And
True.
like, otherwise, then you should be making clear cut upgrades to the roster, which is why I did not give that trade an A. Maybe I was a little bit too generous, which I gave it probably like a B or B minus, something like that at the time. But that was based more on like what Cam could be. But I agree with you. Like, MPJ was a good player, and all you basically traded away your last valuable draft pick for $17 million in cap savings for maybe a year, because they might end up just salary dumping Cam Johnson anyway. We'll get to that as well. I don't have this in the Christian Brown section, so I'm going to say it here just so I don't forget. Um, on the possibility of trading Christian Brown this summer and having to attach assets for that, Denver actually can't trade their 2026 draft pick until draft night because of
Right.
the Stepien rules. But they probably won't trade Christian until after that. So if they wanted to attach that pick as part of a package to move Christian's contract, it would be after they've selected the player and had him for a couple days. And the reason for that is that Christian is in the transition between his rookie deal and his extension, which means he's poison pilled at the moment. And the kind of details of that are in any trade, if you do this before July 1st, this would have applied even if Denver had tried to move Christian at the deadline, for example. The money going out for Denver would have counted as what his current salary is, but the money for the team receiving him would have counted as what his new salary is going to be next season. So that creates a math problem that basically means these contracts don't get traded until after July 1st when all the money gets equalized and it's just his new number.
Right.
There are like probably specialized circumstances where you could pull something like this off just because like the new cap rules make it difficult for teams to make that money work on both sides. So that's probably not going to happen. So theoretically speaking, you won't just see like the 2026 draft pick attached for a CT trade. If Denver takes like a random guy that like nobody thought they would on draft night, there's a possibility that they just took that guy for another team and they've got a deal lined up to include that player like as a pick, for a deal done after July 1st when the league calendar turns and when all of the contracts become kind of normalized and the poison pills no longer apply.
I think that just happened to Walker Kessler when he was drafted to Minnesota and he was traded like a few days later.
Okay. That would actually explain that a lot more.
Yep.
I didn't understand why Minnesota took him if they were just going to trade for Rudy. Or they had just traded for Rudy. I don't remember the exact timing on that.
I think Rudy got traded after the draft.
Was after. Yeah.
And they took Kessler and then he got traded to the Jazz.
Okay. I was like, why if you're that explains it actually.
Yep.
Okay. So we talked about MP. Okay, MPJ on the glass. All right. So going back to that OKC series, you've kind of alluded to this here, but you also talked about it in your offseason pod. You said that this team, with MPJ in particular, was one game away from a Western Conference Finals against OKC last year. And that was kind of your evidence of like how the roster has regressed. In addition to like, it was like, yeah, they were a game away from the Western Conference Finals one year. The next year they get first rounded in 6 games as the higher seed. Obviously an utter disappointment and failure any way you slice it. But I wanted to know on the roster front, does the 2025 roster with MPJ, with Russ, beat the 2026 Thunder or the 2026 Spurs, assuming everybody was healthy? And you can have different answers for those two teams. I'm basically asking whether they went 7 with OKC because Denver was better than anyone thought they were, and that was masked by, the coaching and front office fallout that kind of defined the end of last season, or was it because OKC was weaker in 2025 than their regular season record suggested?
Yeah, I think OKC was definitely weaker last year compared to this year for sure. But I actually think Denver matched up pretty well with OKC when you put MPJ into that construct and you have Russ off the bench as far as another guard defender, someone who, again, you were able to play Murray off the ball a little bit at certain points of that series. But I think this year's team obviously had much better bench pieces than the Nuggets wise, just because of Tim Hardaway Jr. You added Bruce Brown. Valanciunas wasn't really playoff, I would say, ready, or he wasn't really able to play in the playoffs. And then Watson obviously was out in this series. But I think as far as roster construct wise, so 2 things that were pretty noticeable to me this year compared to last year's team that MPJ and Russ brought specifically was Russ, his speed. And I know that's something that you've mentioned before, is them missing speed and that they need to bring that into the table. And MPJ, as far as being an athlete was concerned, Russ and MPJ were more athletic than what we saw on the roster this year. Is that they're much more undersized, I thought, this team this year, and also way less athletic. And with Russ, he obviously brought a quickness aspect and a playmaking aspect. And you brought up a great point earlier, is that you said getting Jokic easy buckets. And I think last regular season, Russ was able to set the table up for Jokic to get those easy buckets in the paint, as a roller, off of cuts as well. Like, we didn't really see a lot of cutting from Jokic this year as far as last year. With the
even the year before without Russ, like that's been a big that in particular has been a bigger we've seen a bigger decline in that aspect of the offense than I necessarily would have expected. And we've seen increases in other, interesting areas for sure, but Jokic's off ball Offense, not
Kind
so
of
much. Like
dwindled.
he's a lot.
Yep.
It's been a lot more of him as a hub, not necessarily operating on the block, but
Right.
more high
Less post
posts
ups.
and yeah.
Yep, definitely less post ups. So, I mean, would I say that the Nuggets team of 25 beats, you said OKC this year? I
Yes.
would
Healthy.
probably not. I don't think it would be close, but probably not. I would say that the Nuggets would beat Minnesota with last year's team. Uh, with this year's team, and MPJ brought that up on his podcast or whatever he was on. I saw a clip that he said if McDaniels was on Murray, that there would be no one else to guard him, and that he would kind of be more
That's true.
playable
Having MPJ
than
there,
that. Yeah,
like they really had Jayden sticking to MPJ for that series, and they didn't have Nikhil this year, which was a big difference from 2024. So that would have
right,
been perhaps interesting to see. But they didn't feel that Cam was a big enough threat to have to stick McDaniels on him and kind of risk kind of Jamal breaking loose either. So I'm actually curious to see what kind of choices Finch would have made in that situation. Um, because you could argue that it was driven by like MPJ not being there, but it was also driven by them not having Nikhil and
right,
being like Jayden's our option. Like he has to guard Jamal, especially given the physical condition that Ant was in at the beginning of the series before obviously he went out. I actually think if Ant hadn't gotten so if that was runner's knee hadn't gotten so bad that he had to leave the series, Denver wins that series because Ant looked so bad when he was on the court. Um, well, except for like he would have these like random flashes where you're like, "Are you injured?" But then for the rest of the game, it would be like, "Please keep him on the floor."
right.
um, yeah. On the Russ conversation though, you clearly think that letting Russ walk was a mistake. Not just letting Russ walk. All reports indicate that Denver was like, "Please don't pick up your player option." They did not want him to come back. And ignoring the like Russ himself, because he is this like very singular figure, both uh sort of culturally for the team, and also if you're talking about like the spectrum of chaos agents, whether you view that as positively or negatively, like Russ is like an archetypal example of that. But on Denver not really bringing in any kind of X factor that could even try to approximate what Russ brought in that sense. What do you think drives Denver's low tolerance for deviation? I'm not even saying that they necessarily should have kept Russ. Again,
Right.
it's just they don't try to bring in guys that can kind of be, I don't even know what the right
Go off the
word is
script.
for that. Yeah, guys that go off the script a little bit.
Mhm.
But that can be like, yeah, an X factor, like a high variance, like a high risk, high reward kind of guy to just kind of have available.
Right, and I think with Russ, it was more so, if you didn't wanna bring back Russ, like, particularly, that I think that's, you know, that's quantifiable. It's justifiable, in order for doing that, but I think with Russ, it was more so of the skill set that the Nuggets were lacking. Not Russ, obviously, individually is a very talented player, even still at this age and what he brings to
Yeah.
the table. Um, and he actually did bring a different kind of look to Denver's offense, the regular season before. But then once we saw in the playoffs, he did swing the Clippers series. He basically
Defensively.
defensively, right? He
Yeah.
basically turned into a 3 and D player after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is it more so of I'm not sure because we only can glean so much from what we see on the outside. Is it more so of a Murray and Jokic thing where it's, they're the two franchise guys and they need to control the offense compared to no one else can go off the script? Is it Jokic saying that he trusts Murray as his running mate and he's the only guy who can really create in the two-man game with Gordon, I think occasionally, as far as him, working his way into three-way kind of
He does
offensive
seem to be the
actions.
one guy that everybody including Jamal and Jokic, also like trust as
Right.
much as Jamal and Jokic, right?
Right.
That the coaches also like it's like AG can do like what it's crazy because you'd have this is kind of a running theme even from the title years. Like, well, AG just took that turnaround post fade again, but nobody gets mad when AG does it. They're like,
Right.
AG can do whatever he wants. Why do you think that is? Like, what is the difference between AG and other guys that go off script at times?
Maybe tenure, I think, is part of it. I mean, AG's been probably one of the more tenured Nuggets than
Yeah,
some of
at
the
this
other
point.
players. I think with Peyton Watson, we saw this year was mainly out of necessity. And it's a shame we
Yeah.
didn't get to see it in the playoffs or even in like later in the regular season, where factoring Watson into that construct of the offense where you can go off the script and maybe do a little bit more. And that's something moving forward where I don't know if we'll get to that in the conversation, but moving forward, if you're going to give Peyton that contract, there needs to be an allocation of him running pick and rolls, like with Jokic and him operating more on the ball than what we've seen, like to justify that contract, moving forward. Um, but even too, I again go back to MPJ. He said it in the podcast as well, and he had some insightful things where he's kind of said about his Denver tenure. Is that he said like a shot, like a contested shot that he would try to create, like we saw in Brooklyn this year, as far as him going off the script and trying to have the ball in his hands a bit more. And obviously, he's a really like elite off ball player. I would say as far as his cutting and things like that. He said that a shot like that in Denver is not an optimal shot due to the fact that they have so many weapons on the team, with AG and Murray and Jokic. But I think we're kind of seeing at the point this year where Murray and Jokic is the two focal points with guys playing strictly off ball roles. I think at this point has a ceiling. And I think
Mhm.
there needs to be a bit of an amendment as far as adding different looks to the offense because it's just gotten, I think, too predictable at this point as far as the two-man game and some of the actions that they run, just, Murray and Jokic in that aspect. And I think they probably need to add a different skill set as more guys who can get their own as far as offensively trying to break the paint and getting more self-created looks and having Jokic and Murray kind of set the table for everybody else.
Yeah. We've talked a lot on this point about how the sort of ceiling or the lack of dynamism affects the offense, but I just wanted to add a note that I had about how it might also impact them defensively. I actually talked about this when I went on DNVR Serbian Corner, not this past Saturday, but the one before, about how I think the lack of tolerance for mistakes or variance actually leads to a lack of dynamism on both ends of the floor.
It's a good
We've
point.
Everyone's been for years now since I've been following this team. I'm always asking like why don't they force more turnovers or at least try to force more turnovers? They play everything very conservatively on defense, and it's like, well, if you gamble on the perimeter and you miss, in particular, then that's going to leave the rim open because like Jokic isn't that level of rim protector, this, that, and the other. And my response to that is just like looking especially at like how this year in particular went, where Denver was 30th in opponent turnover rate again. I think that's 2 seasons in a row. They were either 30th or like 28th last year. It was still not good.
Right.
But even with a new defensive system under a new defensive coordinator and all of that, they play everything pretty conservatively on defense, and that's both I think they probably played more aggressive schemes at times this year, but the actual execution was pretty conservative. And my response to the critiques of like, well, the gambling could like lead to just more open layups. Like we were giving up open layups anyway.
Right.
Just try it. Let's just see what happens. I think that Denver between the rebounding, defensive rebounding in particular, they also had a decline in offensive rebounding this season, which I think was actually a good thing because last year they were kind of very um uh they were too kind of focused and honed in on the offensive glass, and I think it hurt their transition defense even more last year in like a reckless, like haphazard way. But you have to find other ways to win the possession battle. And if you're going to be 30th in turnover rate, it's just going to be opponent turnover rate, it's gonna be very difficult for you. It's always gonna be an uphill battle, and you're just focused on trying to decrease opponent efficiency. But in 2026 in the NBA, especially in the regular season, that's really hard to do for 82 games. And I think that they need to be willing to play certain things more aggressively than they do. And that's both schematically and execution wise, which I think plays into some of the personnel things that we'll talk about later in the show, where it's like, well, there are certain players that are just better at stiffing out the ball, both on ball and off ball, to generate those steals, to generate those deflections, to get the opponent, even if you're not getting the steal, like you can get a deflection and get the opponent deeper in the shot clock and decrease their efficiency that way. Instead of leaving everything so comfortable and relying on a pretty conservative scheme to to drive your defense home. Okay. In your offseason pod, you had a very interesting section to me that addressed a topic that I think roiled Nuggets fandom during the Wolves series, where you talked about Jayden calling everyone out by name and calling everyone bad defenders. You said Jayden called out all those guys by name: Jokic, Jamal, Tim. You went on to say, he said those guys are bad defenders, so we're going to go after them with our guys who are not even primary options. Ayo Dosunmu, converted. TSJ, converted, right? I was listening to that section. And I was like, I am like so locked in on this right now. I can't imagine being one of your middle school students, because it was you were delivering it with such like stern calmness that I was feeling ashamed listening to it.
The coach came out there a little bit.
That's where I think the coach came out here. On the defensive stuff, executionally, and I'll let you kind of elaborate on your position here. I wouldn't have classified what happened with Denver, what Denver did in that series as quote unquote giving up. Mm-hmm. I don't think they gave up. I also don't think, especially defensively, that they played with anywhere near the amount of heart or fire that I saw from other teams in the playoffs.
Right.
What I saw on the floor was a really good effort for a regular season game, but that wasn't the playoff standard. And I wanted to get your take on what you think happened, in particular with the one-on-one defense, and also how Denver schematically and just like as a team should have countered some of that, but also how the primary just like containment played into Denver's like relatively poor defensive performance. Because obviously the numbers weren't bad, but like for these playoffs where everybody's efficiency was down, it wasn't great.
Right. I think there's definitely a couple aspects to that. I think that's a great question. I would say number one, the Wolves just wanted it more than the Nuggets. I mean, just as far as like just that point, as far as not even schematically, the Wolves definitely have. They think it's a rivalry between the Nuggets, and I don't know if the Nuggets really even think of that. I mean, they've lost twice to them in the past 3 years in the playoffs now, where they've gotten eliminated. And like McDaniels, he backed up everything that he said in his post-game presser. And again, the Wolves didn't win against San Antonio, but in the Nuggets case, they beat the Nuggets again 2 out of 3 years in a row. I think schematically, I saw this. We'll probably get to this in a later segment. Murray and Jokic defensively, I'm not sure how tenable that is moving forward as far as two guys you can constantly put in action, whether that's a pick and roll, whether that's isolation, where Jokic doesn't get isolated because the Nuggets proactively mitigate that due to their scheme, playing him at the level, playing him in various zone coverages. If they did that, I don't even think they played a lot of zone in the playoffs for some reason, where that was really a lot more successful in last year's playoff run. And I think with KCP leaving 2 years ago, that skill set did not get replaced. And with Christian, I think he brings certain defensive strengths to the table, but not strengths that I think amplify Jokic's, or maybe not amplify is the right word, maybe more so are protective of Jokic's defensive weaknesses. As far as screen navigation is concerned, being a deterrent at the point of attack, kind of forcing the ball handler to take extra dribbles as far as, when the Nuggets play at the level and their baseline
Anything
defender
to
is tagging the roll man.
Anything to
Right.
increase that margin for error on defense and like giving the defense a chance to recover.
Right.
Right.
Yep. And I think, like you said, with the turnover aversion point, I don't think the Nuggets have the requisite personnel in order to really play defense at like that high of a level.
But CT, do they have the requisite personnel to not be 30th in opponent turnover rate? Like Denver is not the worst defensive team in the league. Denver is not the team that has the worst defensive personnel in the league. Denver is not the team that has the least aggressive potential in their personnel defensively in the league either. So I want to draw a contrast between, this isn't me asking them to be a team that's top 5 in opponent turnover rate. They're never going to be, OKC or some of these other teams that are high turnover forcing teams, which by the way was a really big trend among the top 10 defenses in the end. I think 6 or 7 out of the 10 top 10 defenses were also top 10 in opponent turnover rate. That was a big part of what we saw happening in terms of the league becoming a more defensively oriented league, is that there were just more turnovers being forced. I'm not even asking Denver to be top 10. I'm just asking them to not be last. When they won the title in 23, they were 23rd. Right. Which is not great, but it's not dead last.
And then
it's just you need to do more to kind of close that gap between you and the rest of the league, because right now it's widening on that end of the floor in particular.
For sure. And I think with Jokic, I mean, I'm not sure where you land on this opinion, but I think with Jokic, it's gotten tougher as he's aged to cover for his weaknesses. As far as playing in space, especially against 5-out offenses, like we saw the lineup of Naz Reid and Randall just completely dominate their minutes in that series because they were able to play 5-out, and the Nuggets were able to get in rotation, constantly in rotation. Another factor is AG was out in the series, and he's their defensive linchpin. I mean, even though he has his injury history the past years has been worrisome, and he hasn't really been healthy for a lot of it. Watson out as well, even though he didn't really have that great of a defensive year considering his improved offensive game and kind of more, I would say, him leaning on that more than defense. Schematically, like I said, I'd rather them play a lot more zone because then they're not put in rotation as much as we've seen comparatively if they're playing straight up, whether that's at the level. And I think with Jokic, a big issue is with him and Murray is that playing drop with Jokic is something that's kind of off the table. So that's another one of your defensive schemes that you can't really rely upon. And when they're playing man-to-man and not zone, they're only playing Jokic at the level when he's in ball screens. And probably one more point on their defense. I don't know if you saw the stat that Brunson was not switched into basically like a lot of. They never conceded.
They never
switch
him. Yeah,
right.
He just hedges a lot. I think his hedges are terrible, but New York was able to cover for it, and also the Spurs. We didn't really talk about the Spurs too much in this, but I think it was just a continuation of some of the things that Will and I talked about earlier in the series and earlier in the playoffs with the Spurs offense, that when it comes to the half court, the combination of Wemby not quite knowing who he is offensively, and also the guards not necessarily knowing how to play with each other, even though they have their flashes of individual brilliance, kind of turns the half court into a minefield for them.
Right. With Murray, he was just constantly switched into action. And when you saw him the title run, and even last year against OKC, he was not switched into action a lot, as much as we saw this year compared to him guarding Shea, which was the matchup they obviously wanted because he's, one of the Denver's more, you could target him defensively, say him with him and Jokic as well. This year, I just saw there was just like a complete concession of whoever it was out there, and like I said that in my podcast to close the year is that like Terrence Shannon was isolating on Murray and calling him for switches. Bones Highland was getting Murray on an island for switches. DiVincenzo, when he was healthy, at times when he had the ball in his hands, he was getting Murray on an island. Ant, obviously. There was just not enough counters to say, you know what, Murray, you're not getting switched into the action at all. We're gonna make sure you hedge. And if they hit the pick and pop, if they go guard to guard action, then that's fine. But it was just constantly the Wolves were getting downhill. And again, I think Murray's defense was really poor, which obviously moving forward that has to improve if the Nuggets are going to get back to a point of them contending at a high level. But it was more so of just like there wasn't really any kind of counters to what the Wolves were putting out there. So, and that kind of takes us into more of the team build aspect where Murray and Jokic, I'm not sure if that's tenable anymore unless you really improve the defensive counterparts that they have next to them. Like if we see the Knicks, right? Like OG Anunoby.
Yeah.
Would you say OG is a better defender all around than AG at this point? I mean,
at this point, unquestionably, especially because you could say AG maybe has higher peaks, but I think OG has pretty high peaks. Like this is a guy that's kind of perennially in depoy conversation, even if he doesn't necessarily win. But like to your point, Cat and Brunson were deemed unplayable together a year ago.
Right.
Cat is the same age as Jokic. I think Jokic is like 6 months older, by the way. So both bigs, both now over 30 years old. With playing with a guard that I don't think that Jamal is like a worse defender than Jalen Brunson, right? But obviously in a playoff setting, Cat has way less offensive responsibility than Jokic, especially when it comes to creation. Right. Has a lot more finishing responsibility, which maybe plays into exactly what we were saying when it comes to having more creators on the team to take off some of that aspect of the burden off Jokic so that he can dedicate more time to the defensive end of the floor. That Jokic had really good defensive stretches in that series. The problem is they came when his offense was at rock bottom in that series. And then really when the offense started to creep back up in terms of just his efficiency, the defense fell off a cliff.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And so you really need to think about reducing his burden on one end of the floor or the other. And at this point, I actually think it'd be easier to reduce it on offense than it would be on defense, because the nature of his position is that he's going to be involved a lot on defense. And so you need him to be effective on that end of the floor. It's not like Jalen Brunson where you can just hedge everything. It's not like Jokic just getting called out to the perimeter and you can just hedge all those actions. Like he's involved. He's the center. He's guarding those bigs. And when he's not, he's going to be having to guard closeouts on the perimeter because of how the other team is going to arrange their offense to try and attack that particular counter that Denver tries to go to, where they just take Jokic off the big, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. You can continue.
Do you think Denver can allow that offensively, where Jokic and Murray's usage is scaled back with the current iteration of roster that they have right now?
Can allow that offensively? Well, I think they need to make changes, but I also think that this is going to be the third offseason in a row that Will and I are going to have multiple conversations about how the bet that Denver is making is that 1.5 of Peyton Watson, Christian Braun, Julian Strawther develop into a competent secondary creator. And we have not seen that on any kind of consistent basis for those three guys for a variety of reasons. Right.
I think partially that is, with Peyton this year, we only saw that when Jokic was out. But it comes down to, will the Nuggets give guys like Strawther, who has shown a bit more, I think, of offensive punch than what we've seen so far in his career? And with Watson this year as well, will the Nuggets be willing to provide those guys the reps and as in a game to do that when they're fully healthy? Or will it just still be the same script of Murray and Jokic being the two-man game and they create everything offensively, and maybe with the little bit of Aaron Gordon in that mix?
To your point, CT, when to your point about how we didn't really see it with Peyton until Jokic was out starting in January. Peyton started off the season very slow. Like
Right.
he was going to be like basically the same level of like sometimes factor, not really a factor on a consistent basis for the roster. That was the trajectory that he was on for the first, I would say, month of the season. Even after we got very early on injuries to Christian Brown and Aaron Gordon. Peyton did not starting until when Christian got injured. We were starting Tim.
Right.
And I don't think that Peyton started starting immediately when AG got injured, but it was very clear after like we needed to have another forward in that starting lineup. And sometimes it was Spencer Jones. And I don't know where that comes from at this point when it's like he's in his 4th year with the team now. They traded a future first round pick to trade into the draft to get him in 2022. He's shown some flashes of on-ball stuff, and he's shown like even more flashes of at least being able to be an inconsistent, impactful defensive playmaker at worst, right? And he's not getting the starting nod when your starting shooting guard goes down. Okay, DA wants to play a shooter, whatever. When AG goes down, it's Spencer Jones starting in that spot for a few games before Peyton Watson comes in because Cam Johnson got injured. And then obviously Peyton starts on a consistent basis in January when literally everybody's pets' heads fell off, right? When the team's pets' heads fell off in January and we were missing like 3 to 4 starters at any given time. And that is part of what I was talking about earlier when it comes like Peyton is a little bit of a he plays a little bit off script. I also think that he's had many long stretches of being the guy that will be like, okay, I'll play this role for you. Like, okay, fine, I'll do the dunker spot thing. I'll play off ball. I'll run.
Right.
I'll go to the corner. I'll take the corner shot. I'll cut. I'll do whatever. But he also has the ability to play off script a little bit and does sometimes. But that has not been nurtured or fostered at all in Denver, despite that being a major missing factor in this team. And I don't necessarily understand where that resistance has come from. I wanna move on to Christian while we're on this because it's a related conversation here. I actually had, when I was making these notes, a really hard time figuring out where to start with Christian because his performance this past season was so abysmal and obviously largely like he was racked by injury for most of the season and clearly hampered by it, even going into the playoffs, right? What I eventually landed on was this question. Was making Christian a permanent starter actually the worst thing Denver could have done for Christian's development for Denver?
That's a good question. I think that his starting spot was probably accelerated by 1 year due to the KCP move that happened the year before.
That was purposely accelerated.
Right. Purposely accelerated.
Yeah.
Yep. And KCP was still a good player. Obviously, he didn't have a good series against Minnesota, but like we were saying, his contributions actually the past 2 years were sorely missed as far as like what he brought to the table, as far as like we were saying, a guy who could spot up shoot. Point more so defensively was where the Nuggets have missed him over the past 2 years, and versatility guarding up, he was guarding down. I mean, even look in the Lakers series, he was guarding LeBron at certain points.
Yeah.
Just the Nuggets have missed that versatility on that end of the floor. I mean, maybe it comes down to as far as the Nuggets' belief, I would say, in Christian as far as role is concerned, comparatively to maybe their draft evaluation, even though it's a new regime now. But for me, I always thought of Christian as when I scouted Christian, you know, and obviously was a proponent of Denver taking him. And I think it worked out as far as, you know, him being taken at pick 22, able to contribute on a title team and be a playable NBA player in that range of the draft is a win.
Yeah.
Like is definitely a clear win. And I know a lot. I think there's been a lot of over indexing on some of that, but yes, he is a starter now for a team that has title aspirations. And for me, when projecting kind of his like the role, I would say it was more so of like a spot starter for me, like high end bench guy, like 6-man spot starter type, than like starter on a championship winning team. And maybe there was a bit of an over indexing on that, as far as when they gave him the contract. But um, I think the team has done like he's done everything that the team has asked of him. But as far as him being elevated in this role now, there comes with more responsibilities on that end of the floor. And it's more so, I think, of like a skill set thing. Like we saw when Will Barton was on the team, the Nuggets had another secondary creator, a guy who was more offensively skewed than defensively. KCP was a guy who was more so defensively oriented, where he was, I think, amplified Murray and Jokic and made them more tenable defensively as a duo, as far as what he brought to the table. And with Christian now, I think he has defensive strengths as far as he's, taller than KCP, stronger on that end of the floor, better rebounder, defensive rebounder. But as far as what the configuration of the team is now with Murray and Jokic, there probably needs to be a bit more of a defensive oriented focus as far as being a POA navigator and someone who's more of a stopper type in that aspect.
Has anything you've seen in Christian's development, let's say even like at his best, changed your original evaluation in terms of where he'd end up relative to like being a starter or just a spot starter, mostly bench guy?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, probably has overperformed a little bit from what I had probably thought originally within my big board that I had. I think in that year I had Christian as like not a lottery guy, but like a top 20 player in that class. And if we're looking back now, I mean, he's definitely performed probably,
Yeah.
definitely lottery value, no doubt, maybe even higher in his class. But I mean, the transition finishing is something last year that we saw. It was obviously very dynamic. Um, and as far as this year, I think it's more so the half court where it becomes problematic offensively.
Which is where Denver likes to play.
Right. And it's more so of like we just said, like that's more of maybe now that stylistically there needs to be some changes on that end of the floor. I think it's more so all around. Of course, I think, with the injury that Christian had this year played a major part in his poor output that we saw. But also too, when it comes to getting the extension and having those responsibilities as far as like on a title contender, there has to be, I see why there's been such a I would say like a negative kind of response to like the playoff output that had happened. And of course, I think next year, like, do I expect him fully to play like that again next year? No, I think he'll definitely be way better. But like I said, it's more so for me, more of like a stylistic like output as far as around Jokic and Murray. That's where the question kind
Where
of
the question is, yeah.
comes into play.
Yeah, and like you talk, I completely agree with you that just based on what this sort of version of the team needs from him, it's a lot more of a defensive orientation and focus and getting that to be like a high level. There was a comment earlier that Denver's really struggled to put plus defenders around Jokic. Like, yeah, they put good defenders around Jokic, but Jokic is getting to a stage in his career where he needs great defenders around him, right? And when it comes to Christian, I've had my qualms about his defense for large stretches of frankly his career because his second year was, they were trying out some different roles for him off the bench as like they tried
Point
to
guard,
point guard, primary ball handler and doing more on that end, and the defense definitely suffered. And then he kind of strapped up toward the end of the year. Then last season, it was just completely out the window until the playoffs. And I literally was like, I don't even know where this came from because we didn't see any of it last year. And I think he still had his struggles in round one in particular against the Clippers. But I thought he was very good against the Thunder. But then the question is like, well, was that him or was that OKC? And as for this year, a lot of people do place a lot of the blame on the injury, but I wanted to ask you if Christian just went back to the player that he was in 24-25, is his contract justified for Denver?
Again, for me, it's more so of like the stylistic.
Right. I mean, that
output.
player that is like finishing everything in transition and not much else.
I'd probably say it was a little bit over indexed as far as the final amount, but I would say definitely it's close. Definitely, I would maybe say like around less than 20 million around there, maybe. I would say, but
One of
for
my
me, it's more so of the skill set that is where team building wise is where I have more of the hang up.
It was interesting watching the finals this year with the Knicks because Josh Hart has been my favorite sort of comp for what Christian's sort of like reasonable, really good outcome could be for him. And there's a substantial gap in certain things that Josh Hart does and how he operates and where Christian is at right now, where Josh Hart doesn't have a whole lot of he doesn't have like a confidence issue. Sometimes he'll hesitate on threes, but it's not to the degree that Christian is at right now with it, like the hesitation on his shot. Josh Hart is also a lot more comfortable handling the ball and creating opportunities for his teammates. He can get downhill, not necessarily in the half court, but he's like, if he gets stonewalled in transition, he'll still deform the defense and not completely reset, but just like create like a slight advantage before getting the ball out to somebody else right now. I think there's like these small margins that Christian would need to build up to get to that level. But the gap isn't that small, but it is meaningful, right? It's or the gap is small but meaningful right now. It's so interesting how, you know, basketball is this game of margins, and the athleticism is a game of margins, and like the smallest like step or skill advantage that you can have can become magnified in terms of its impact for your team. Personally, I think that the team would benefit a lot from Christian coming off the bench, not as a punishment, but really as a way to maximize the role that Denver really needs from him, and just make Peyton Watson a starter. I'm personally, of the reasonable outcomes for this summer, and maybe it's the least reasonable of the reasonable outcomes, is that they just re-sign everybody and they have Christian come off the bench and make Peyton the starter. And it would create an opportunity for Christian to be that spark plug off the bench again, really hone in on improving defensively and coming in and being that like pesky like dude that he was like his rookie season is and I think we're such a long way off from that right now that it's kind of hard to see if that's even where, you know, where he or the team sees his trajectory necessarily, because of, again, just elevating him to the permanent starter position that he's in.
It's more so of the little things that Christian needs to bring to the table.
Like the hustle
with Josh Hart.
There was that game against the Lakers where like LeBron beats him to that loose ball and everyone was really mad. And I was like, first of all, it's crazy that LeBron came flying in for that ball. And also, Christian should have been first to the floor.
Right.
Like both of those things can be true at the same time.
In his role, just needs to do more of the kind of the things that players aren't willing to do. Like you say, be a grab and go guy off the glass. Like he's dynamic in transition. Once you get the rebound, just go. But again, I think Hart's a different player than CB. You know, better passer. Someone who has more of an advanced handle with the ball, where you can actually give Josh the ball in the half court. He can initiate some of the offense. Obviously, there's some detriments to that because of the shooting, but yeah, I think moving forward, that's just gonna have to be just has to be kind of the skill set that needs to be honed in on. If Denver wants to get back to contending.
Josh Hart, $21 million next year. Just saying.
I didn't realize he was making that.
No, I mean that's why it's one of my favorite comps. It's like, oh, yep, the money and everything makes sense to me. All right, let's move on to Cam. A month ago, the trade momentum seemed to be moving in the direction of Cam being the one to get dumped to quote unquote make room in Stan Kroenke's wallet to pay Peyton Watson. Reminder, again, there are no rules stopping Denver from paying Peyton whatever is necessary to retain him. He is their restricted free agent, or will be as soon as they extend that qualifying offer, but they own his bird rights and nothing stopping them from matching whatever to keep him. I still think that this is the most likely outcome for the summer, is that Cam gets moved and they just pay Peyton and kind of deal with everything else on the back end. But there are some recent reports that cast doubt on whether Denver actually wants to keep Cam. Would it actually be malpractice to not just run it back with Cam and see what another year in Denver's system could do for his confidence in playing next to Jokic, especially after spending your most valuable draft asset to get him?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at like the most optimal way to build the team moving forward, you would, bring everybody back, including Peyton, and then see what you have. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be the outcome due to financial reasons. But yeah, you traded your best asset that you had, at your draft asset that you had, for Cam, and it seems like it's only going to be for a 1 year sample, just
Yeah.
from based on them wanting to bring Peyton back and the construct of their books that they want to have, that's going to be the case. But yeah, I think with Cam's year, I mean, he had an up and down year. I actually give him a bit of benefit of the doubt because it's tough. I think it's tougher than people think in order to play in an offense where it's so centric around two guys, compared to where he was in Brooklyn. Um, so I see some of the,
You mean
you
in
know,
Jordy's pyramid scheme?
yeah, right. But I do think it was actually tougher than people give it credit for to fit into the offense, and it took a while for it to happen. But when you're traded for MPJ, like we said, who was a good player, won a ring with Denver, and Denver traded one of their valuable picks. There comes expectations with that, regardless. And I think for most of the year it was too turbulent, uh, especially with Jokic. I think Jokic had qualms as far as just from what I saw on the court. It seemed like Jokic had a bit of a frustration with Cam maybe not being in the right spot offensively, some actions maybe that were not ran properly, or things like that. But yeah, I think with what Denver gave up, they definitely should. As far as like asset perspective and like the return value on what Cam would get in a deal, I think it would make sense for them to bring him back. Even though I do have a bit of a hesitancy, I think, with the skill set as far as a fit in Denver's offense. I think with what they need at that spot is a bit more dynamism offensively and maybe a bit more of a stopper defensively. And maybe that's where Peyton comes in moving forward, where he's playing the three. But
Unfortunately, for large stretches of the season, Cam was our best defender in the starting lineup.
it's true.
Right? But that wasn't his fault. It's like, that's not a good thing, but that's not his fault. Yeah. I would really like for them to not just dump Cam, but we'll talk about what some of the options are in front of Denver. There's when we get to the draft portion. You had a quote about Julian Strawther that really, like, I literally had, like, it was like a jump scare when I heard it. You said Strawther is one of the most athletic guys on the team. And the reason that was a jump scare for me is that I was like, holy shit, that's true. And that's not a good thing, because while Julian has his own level of athleticism, he doesn't necessarily stand out in the grand scheme of like the NBA, at least
Right.
like the top of the NBA, right?
Not dunking on people, things like that.
Right. Why do you think Julian didn't play more in the playoffs this year? Especially with the absences that they had, with AG out for most of the series and Peyton out for the entire series, and Denver being at a deficit in terms of, I mean, creation, and just not in creation, but just like guys who know how to do offense, be in the right spots, maybe dribble, maybe take a shot,
Attack a closeout.
attack a closeout. But instead we got like Tyus Jones. And we probably got like a lot more Spencer Jones than anybody would have guessed at the beginning of the year, for example.
Right.
In that situation. And I would have expected Spencer to be in the rotation regardless, just because of where everything was at. But I am surprised that Julian didn't play more. Yeah, where do you think that came from?
I think probably more of the overarching take would be that Denver wanted to play their veterans this year comparatively to the past 2 playoff runs where they only had rookies really in their backup rotation. Um, they wanted to rely more on Bruce, on THJ, guys who have been there and played in playoff series and things like that. Um, and this is another reason that I also said it on my show is that the Nuggets skill sets were not really conducive to them countering the Wolves game plan that they had. You look at a guy like THJ and Bruce and Spencer Jones, like those guys are play finishers.
Yeah.
Julian's a guy who I'm not saying he's a point guard or anything like that. He does provide a bit more of an offensive spark as a guy who can create off a DHO. He's shown an ability to hit Jokic in the pocket off of pick and rolls before. He's a guy who has a good floater. And he did come in. I think he came
Has
into
a bit quicker of a first step than you'd expect. I feel like the way that he weaponizes that is that his defender has never thinks that Julian would be able to get a step on him, which makes it easier for Julian to get a step on him.
Right.
But it happens more often than you'd think.
Defensively is probably where the biggest worry comes in. But again, the Nuggets were getting put in rotation at will in the series anyway, so you might as well have played more of an offensive centric player.
Yeah,
Tyus playing over Julian, I thought was definitely surprising. That was one where I was pretty surprised at the decision there. Yeah, definitely the decision there. But we're going into the last year of Julian's contract before he's a restricted free agent, so this is kind of like the last run to see what, if he's going to be here long term or not. But I value his contribution as a guy who's a plus size guard with his height, 6'6", 6'7". And he is one of the more athletic guys on the team, but I think that comes more so of like he's very quick end to end. As far as like he's a really good defensive rebounder, so I would actually like to see him do more of a grab and go. As far as him taking shots in transition, hitting corner shooters or things like that. But I think it was more so like overarching take why he didn't play in the playoffs is more so the veterans were brought in for a reason to play over him. And that kind of was like the final say there for the most part. And game 3, he only got a few minutes and he didn't really play well, but it's so tough to come into a playoff environment like that where you really haven't played at all within I didn't think he played in the last month or so, right? Really, he didn't really play a good amount of the time in the last couple games of the regular season and then going into the playoffs. It's tough to kind of gain a rhythm like that as well. And yeah, his confidence is another thing too, where he's kind of a bit more bashful as far as shot selection. Yeah. And Denver needs that. Like we were saying, you need some guys to go off the script. And I think Julian and Peyton as well are guys who are willing to do that, when given the chance.
Yeah. I found a stat that kind of surprised me when I was going through it, just wondering about how Julian's minutes had been. There was so much talk about last year and not leaning into the youth more and developing and all of this stuff. But Julian played under 800 non-garbage time minutes this year. And that is a little under half of what he played the year before, just in the regular season alone, which was around 1,300. This was despite an objectively worse injury situation for Denver and their starters this last season, right? Where everybody died for a month at a time at least. And Julian ended up playing less. And it kind of got me wondering whether Julian was actually just a Malone guy. And I thought that Adelman would end up playing him more. And maybe that just wasn't true. Speaking of Adelman, how would you evaluate David Adelman's job? Let's skip the regular season portion because I think that you can give him some grace on the overall situation because of how well they did when Jokic was out and Jokic came back with the injuries. And you can chalk a lot of the kind of February to early March malaise on that. But in the playoffs, how would you evaluate David Adelman's job?
Yeah, I think it was it was definitely a rough playoffs, I think, for everyone involved, players, coaches, going out like that in round one with your best players and the Wolves basically losing Ant and DiVincenzo towards Achilles in that series as well. I don't think there was really an excuse to lose that series. And um, I was impressed with Adelman's output in the regular season. Like you said, when Jokic was out, the Nuggets were able to go on a run and win some games that they probably shouldn't have won. Um, I was an appreciator of the scheme this year offensively, where more guys were involved, handling the basketball. Whether that was CB at certain times, Cam Johnson was running some pick and rolls here and there. Like there was more, I would say, of an inclusion of other skill sets to add to Denver's offense. Um, the year before, I appreciated Adelman playing a lot more zone, especially against OKC, and that was a big factor in them going 7 in that series, which we didn't see that this year. And it was
which
kind
we
of odd
probably should have because of
Right.
all the teams that. And I complained about the zone and how like lazy it was and how like not necessarily like executionally lazy, not necessarily as a scheme, but and how it wasn't necessarily deployed against the right opponents and whatever. We played so much zone against the Wolves in the regular season and it was super effective. And we just went completely away from that in the playoffs.
Right.
There were a lot of changes like that and the more egalitarian offense. Like, what do you think drove those changes on both sides of the ball as choices by David Adelman this year?
I mean, more so like the transition to the playoffs was that 2 of their guys you could effectively say can absorb more usage offensively were out in AG and Payton. So I think that's part of the factor there. A lot of it's the personnel is that there's a lot of play finishers on the team. Like if Tim Hardaway Jr. wasn't hitting threes, this is more of like the overarching take of like the Nuggets needing more of a baseline, like offensively and both ends of the floor, but mainly offensively is that if Tim Hardaway Jr. wasn't hitting threes, then what else was he
Yeah.
what else was he contributing? Bruce Brown was kind of the same way where you couldn't really break the paint either. And then Spencer
Or
Jones,
make a layup.
or make a layup. If Spencer Jones was hitting threes, and he was a rookie playing in the playoffs, like a larger role, so I give him credit. But even still, as far as his skill set is concerned, if he's not making threes offensively, he's not a guy who can dribble or pass really. So more so on that aspect of the personnel needing, I think, a bit more of an overhaul on that end of the floor. But yeah, I was surprised. Like even earlier in the regular season, like the Nuggets were picking players up full court in the preseason, especially. That was a big change that I had saw. They were trying to use more of their physicality on that end of the floor, and that just completely went away. And like the Bulls really had no more ball handlers left. Like at the end of the
Yeah.
series, Ant was out, DeSumo was out, DiVincenzo was out. Like you should be pressuring those guys to make decisions, and they just kind of let them walk the ball off the court. So yeah, all around, I didn't think it was a good playoff series for the coaching front. Schematically, I didn't think it was good as far as tactical wise, and even like I don't know, like motivation wise either. Like I didn't.
They were not really up to playing playoff basketball.
Yeah, it wasn't really. I think with Malone, we were more spoiled because he was more vocal in like press conferences. And
Sure.
you saw him with that on the sideline too, where he was more
But
vocal,
you can
getting on
you can
players
evaluate
and
that based on what the players like put out on the floor. Like Malone
Right.
got fired because the players like all of that started to spill out onto the on court, and it's like, well, if this isn't producing for what's happening on the court, then like we have to evaluate you harshly. I think it's fair to do the same with Adelman in the playoffs, right?
Right. It seemed like both approaches at this particular in the current time have not worked. Right. Malone's more so of being more of like we're seeing he's coaching at college now. His personality is more so of getting on players who are, uh, within in the NBA. Of course, it worked. They won a championship, but I'd say like moving forward now it is more so like he's geared to coach college. I think moving forward, like that's why I think he's going to be a really good college coach. And then you saw with Adam, and he was kind of more of a laid back approach and let what was the kind of the phrasing was the players are policing themselves.
Basically.
Um,
Yeah.
so there was 2 approaches
The
there.
prisoners are running the inmates are running the prison or something.
Yep. And you were seeing that now where both approaches kind of
The
didn't land.
asylum. The inmates are running the asylum. Yeah.
There
That's
it
what it
is.
is.
Both approaches didn't land. I don't think as far as a motivational tactic or maybe of how to conduct uh, player personalities or just how we're seeing them on the floor operate from a motivational standpoint. So, I
Okay.
mean, is it more of a player Maybe it's more of a player kind of leadership angle where that needs to be looked at a bit more closely.
And maybe that plays into the complacency that Josh, harped on in his exit interviews. Okay, last couple of questions here on Denver. We're gonna rapid fire this so that we can finally get to the draft stuff. You talked about we've talked about in this pod and last year, that was a big part of our conversation last summer, was the need to add this secondary on-ball creation, and it has definitely been a very important thread in our conversation today. Do you think it's still the most important hard basketball skill that Denver is missing? And if you could wave a magic wand to address Denver's biggest need, what would that move be? And I'm talking about a universe where you're cosplaying Brad Stevens for a day and you just get to fleece some team. You still have to stay like under the cap, so like money has to work. But like, what would your move be as like the ideal trade for Denver to address their biggest needs?
I don't have a particular player in mind as far as like offensively, the offensive end of the floor. They definitely do need, I think, another dynamic creator, whether that's off the bench or playing alongside Murray. Even like is more offensively skewed than defense at this point. I think just to kind of able to go to a different look.
Even if you don't have a specific player in mind, can you just give the audience like an example of like what kind of player archetype you mean when you say like a dynamic offensive creator? Like what kind of offensive creator? Is it like someone who gets downhill? Is it someone who can
someone who could get downhill without a screen, who's able to switch hunt, someone who's able to break the paint themselves and then is able to finish in the paint and or able to set the table for others, whether that's on kickouts. Denver, I mean, one move that I do have in particular that they should look to do is more so adding someone like a Nick Claxton. And I've kind of pivoted to them going more double big moving forward because I don't know how tenable it is moving forward that they have such a small, I would say, kind of front court next to Jokic. And AG, of course, is someone who's been able to cover for Jokic defensively over the years, and he's obviously had a lot of mileage now on his play, and he's been a bit more injury plagued over the past 2 years from what we've seen. But I think moving forward, the Nuggets probably need a dynamic rim protector that they could play next to Jokic. More of a big type of a big rather than a wing is what I've been floating out there, and we'll get to that with the draft talk coming up. But more so, I think they need to add someone who's able to protect the rim defensively, but also can put pressure on the offensive glass and is able to finish as a dunker spot guy. Of course, you would like to shoot a little bit from three, but more so, I think Denver needs to get back to playing more bully ball.
Do it all. Do it all big to play next to Jokic, basically.
Creator first, definitely, though. And then I would say the double big would be second.
That was my question, is like, which of those things would you prioritize, but you really prioritize the creation?
Yes.
Okay.
More back
again. Okay. Last two questions and try to keep it really quick here. I just want to get you on the record with these because these are kind of like stakes that the fandom is sort of litmus test, I guess, to just understand like where are you at on this question. We've talked about the possibility that Jokic and Jamal, or maybe the probability that Jokic and Jamal are just not viable defensively going forward. If Denver went the way of trading Jamal this summer to probably duck the luxury tax, if they try to do that, and if they want to trade Jamal, would you prefer that they trade for another secondary star that maybe made less money? My ideal of the options in this kind of category is probably Franz Wagner. Or would you rather break his contract up into more role players?
I would probably say France, I think, at this point. Any more further explanation? Just that would be.
I mean, that suffices for now, unless you had anything like that you really want the people to know about.
Yeah, I think adding like a bigger wing creator compared to, guard wise, as far as being a bit small on that end of the floor, I think that would be an interesting look. And then you could plug and play different skill sets next to that.
AG has largely escaped like ire or a real like trade machine cycle because a lot of people think that his injury situation makes his contract harder to move. And I kind of alluded to this in the Cam section, but there have been recent reports that Denver's trying to trade Christian, but then AG is actually garnering more trade interest than maybe you would have thought. Do you think that Denver should consider moving AG? And if they do, AG is such an important cog in the machine of how Denver currently operates when they're really good. What kind of front court partner would you look to replace AG with to transform Denver's identity? Because I don't think that you can be a better version of Denver as they currently operate with like not AG. I think you'd have to be a different team. So it seems like your answer would be going double big.
Right.
Okay.
My answer would be going double big. And with AG, I think you have to kind of look at trades at this point just because he's been, out for the past 2 years with missing a lot of regular season games in the playoffs as well, that I think the availability portion of it comes into play. But I would probably look to go double big.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Because I'm firmly in the camp of if you're going to move AG, you need to change your identity and you have to have an idea of what direction you want to go. Because he's the best when he's healthy. He's the best person you can have at that position for the identity that you have right now. Right. All right. Time to move on to NBA draft. We finally got through it. We're like a little over an hour and a half in, maybe an hour 40 in. All right. Let's start with the ultimate question for Denver when it comes to their draft pick. Do you think that Denver should keep their 2026 first round pick, which is the 26th pick in the draft? It's a little bit confusing because when people talk about draft picks, they talk about years and positions, but Denver has the 26th pick in the 2026 draft. Should they keep the pick, try to move up in the draft, or trade it away completely in a move for probably, given their goals right now, a combination salary dump / roster upgrade?
It's tough for me to try to attach it to, like, say, if you want to move it with Cam Johnson, right? You probably get to around like maybe below pick 20, maybe like 18-ish around there, I would say. Which, if somebody falls that the Nuggets like, they want to go for it, then go for it. Like, say if we'll probably talk about him in a second. Like, if a Yaxel Lendeborg is there at 18, I would do that trade. Then I would trade 26 and Cam for Yaxel, and I would play. Now we're playing bigger perimeter. We're playing Yaxel as a plug and play 3-4 next to AG, and I think that'd be pretty dynamic as far as the.
And you get big at that small forward position again,
right?
Like really big.
Yep. Yaxel 6'8", 6'9" with a 7'3" wingspan.
Yeah.
So defensively, he's a bit more versatile in that aspect.
So you have like a particular like player in that range in mind if Denver were going to move up, but you generally think otherwise Denver should keep their pick because you don't want to trade it away for like anything less than getting like into the late teens probably.
Right. I think with what Denver has asset-wise, it's going to be tough to move up far unless you trade Murray and AG. And I wouldn't do that in this draft to go like that far to trade one of your core guys.
How would you feel if Denver traded 26 and Cam for Ron Holland?
That's something where no, that's been a big conversation within like the summer.
If that were available. If Denver not Denver, if Detroit wanted to do that.
For Ron Holland, I probably would do that. I had Holland, I think, at number 2 on my board, 2 or 3.
Wow.
Back in that class. So it'd be something where you're trying to, make sure that a second contract is something that you can capitalize on moving forward. So I think I would do that, yeah.
Okay. There have been reports as of, I think, was it yesterday or even this morning? I don't know. Everything's like slurring together now, that the Nuggets are looking to move up in the lottery. We had similar reports last year. They were a lot quieter, where it was Denver trying to move into that draft because they did not have a first round pick in the draft last year, but ultimately that didn't pan out. Instead, the Nets just drafted 5 first round picks and I don't know what they were doing. But I know there were lots of teams trying to trade into that draft, and that just didn't happen because for some reason it was really expensive to move into even the back half of that draft last year. Maybe because the Nets just wanted all 5 of those players that they didn't end up playing on the court last year. But let's go over some of the picks that you have for Denver in these different situations. We're going to start with what Denver should do if they end up taking a player at pick 26 in this draft. Will, if you could roll the Jayden Quaintance film here. All right. So I'll cue up the intro and then I'll let CT talk, as he knows a lot more about these players than I do. So Jayden Quaintance, 18 years old, power forward / center out of Kentucky. He was at Arizona State before that. 6'10", 255 pounds is what he's listed at. 7'5" wingspan. I was like, God damn, what are these measurables? He's been comped to like Clint Capella. Robert Williams III, I think, is maybe my favorite comp that I saw of him from the NBA Draft Net guys. Here with the scoring, I think he's pretty like springy, and he's really tough on the offensive glass. Like that, that's something that really stood out in a lot of the film, and just a really good rim runner. And he's also like willing to shoot threes. But I wanted to know, CT, when it came to this particular pick, do you see him as more of a double big option or more of a backup center option for Denver?
I see him more as a double big option. I think with Jokic, you can play him at the 4. And we were Matt Moore and I, at the time, we were having a conversation about this today. I think with Quaintance, and if you're looking at Denver's scheme moving forward, if you're playing him in at the level, right, you're playing Jokic at the level and he's guarding ball screens. If you have Quaintance as a guy who's tagging the roll man, and now you're playing 4-on-3 with Quaintance as a guy who's going to be able to erase mistakes, I think that's something that's really appealing to what Denver can bring into the table. And offensively, Jokic is a guy who obviously can lift the floor of offensive players. You know, he could be a guy who's a dunker spot option, but he's got a bit of a better handle than last year for sure. He's improved his handle as far as attacking, in straight line drives. Dynamic as an athlete and a cutter. He has a 9-1 standing reach, and then he had a 9.8 block percentage this year. His first year at Arizona State, he had a 9.8 block percentage. For reference, Bam Adebayo had a 4.9 block percentage at Kentucky in his freshman year. So
Bam's not much of a shot blocker, though, so I don't know if that's
True.
I don't know how impressive that particular bar would be.
True, more so of just like comparison of the frame and height wise. But with Quaintance, it's more so you're betting on the physical tools, and he did have an ACL tear this year, and he was kind of hampered for a lot of the year. So I really kind of threw out his tape this year compared to last year. But this is someone who I think defensively would be able to cover a lot of Denver's mistakes, and giving someone where you can go double big with Jokic. And I just think the upside at 26, like if he's there, I think it's a play where the Nuggets have kind of preferred more of the high floor players, and this is someone where you can.
This would be an upside play,
right? This is an upside high ceiling play.
Yeah, which they haven't been able to get, or haven't gone for, like you said, in this kind of late first round position here. Well, if you could go on to 804 to the playmaking section. His interior passing is a lot better than I would have expected. We'll see it in some of these clips. Oh yeah, you can just let the reel play from here. Thanks, Will. So here, got a nice outlet pass. I think there's a few clips here where, yeah, like he can pass to some guys that are cutting. The thing that really just, like, watching all of his film, the thing that stands out to me is this guy is so young, but he doesn't play like somebody who's this young, particularly at the position that he's in. Like, he plays, at least from what I've seen, like a pretty competent big man, which is the position that usually takes the most time for guys to develop and get really comfortable in that spot, really on both ends of the floor. But the age definitely scares me for that position. Like for a center, or even like if you wanted him to come in and play power forward in the NBA, why should I not be scared by that?
Well, he was actually the youngest player last year in the class that he was in for his freshman year, and he was ineligible for the draft because he was too young. And going into this year, of course, he had the injury, which was, problematic and kind of affected his output. But I just think the upside is kind of too far along where I just buy it. Defensively being a game changer like that. And as a freshman, that he was able to produce at that high of a level and kind of show that output. Like I said, his block percentage, he was at 60% on 2-pointers. He had and again 45% for career free throw shooter. The offense is definitely way behind the defense right now, but I think as a freshman, seeing that advanced of a defensive tape is something that kind of gives me
Yeah.
hope that he'll be able to the
Yeah,
offense will
well,
eventually catch up to the defense.
yeah, if you could jump to the defense at the a little past the 11-minute mark, well, the defense was really definitely stand out, and particularly the rim defense. Like, he is definitely like a shot blocker. He is a rim presence, if nothing else, defensively. And my question on this player was really like, what was the thing that made him stand out the most to you among like some of the other options that you would have at this spot? Because I think you gave me this list of players kind of ranked, and him being at the top kind of surprised me because of the like riskier, I guess, aspects of him here. Given like the age and like what you would expect of someone at that position. But it is the defense to you that stands out and is worth that upside play, given the spot that Denver is in.
Right.
Okay.
Like on my board, I have, we'll get to him in a second. Like Okorie is higher on my board than Quaintance is. Swain is right in that mix where Quaintance is as well. But I just think where Denver's at defensively, that they're just such a, in a tough spot right now, and that they lack so much rim protection, is that they need to add a guy like that who's able to, I think, complement Jokic in a way where he's able to erase mistakes and able to protect the rim that they clearly need.
And the other thing in particular in relation to the defense is that this kid clearly has a pretty high motor,
right?
Relative to like it's almost like a Dembona, honestly, where it might get like a little haphazard sometimes almost. But you kind of need that energy, especially from someone who's going to be complementing Jokic and AG in the front court, potentially, depending on like what direction Denver ends up going. All right, let's actually move on to Ebuka Okorie next. Will, if you could bring up his tape. So Ebuka is a 19-year-old guard out of Stanford. And also, just while we're here, I wanted to give credit to the No Ceilings guys, because I'm using all of their film compilations here, because they did a nice job of separating things out into scoring, playmaking, and defense. Ebuka, 19, guard out of Stanford, fellow Cardinal here. 6'2", 185, 6'8" wingspan, 32-inch standing vert, which is not bad for somebody his size. Some of the comps I saw were Reggie Jackson and Peyton Pritchard, which were, not necessarily bad. I think that he's a more dynamic scorer than either of those guys, but I see like physically where those comps come from. A lot of the scoring here is going to be like, this kid's a shooter. Like, he is very comfortable getting to a step back three. It's not like a slow shot. Like, it's like a thing that he goes to and he takes it at NBA range. And he's a pretty good shooter, over 35% on almost 6 attempts per game, which is pretty high for college. And then beyond that, he's really good at knifing in on the interior as a scorer. And I'll let CT kind of take it from there.
Yeah, with Okorie, he was actually, he wasn't a top 100 recruit this year in his class. So him able to kind of develop that output, it was pretty impressive. Led the ACC in scoring. He was top 30 in the nation in box plus minus. If you look at some of what he's going to be able to bring to the table, is that he's someone who's a self-creator, and that's where the Nuggets just are lacking. And it's that you need someone who can play in lineups with Jokic, without Jokic, that is able to generate offense for themselves and others. Okorie was at 240 rim attempts on the year, only 56%, which wasn't great, but 13.3% assisted. So this is someone who's getting to the rim without, without a pass. He's doing it all self-created. Say, like you said, 6'2", 6'8" wingspan, 83% free throw shooter on 226 attempts. Pretty high usage as well, 31% usage. And as far as his 3-point shooting was concerned, 23.9% assisted. So a bulk of his makes are unassisted, where he's creating for himself.
Do you worry about that high of a usage rate? And like he was kind of generally like he was like relatively efficient for his position, but would you worry about that actually going down if his usage went down? Because he's not going to have 30% usage in the NBA.
Right. And I think that was a lot of it was just team construct. He didn't play with a lot of offensively skewed players. They kind of had more of defensive oriented players around him, guys who can catch and shoot. But I do think in the league, he'll be able to scale down as far as playing an off ball role as a catch and shoot player if needed in like 2-guard lineups. I think he'll be able to attack closeouts, especially like we said, off a tilted floor. His first step is just really quick, and like his bend and flexibility, just is able to kind of get to the rim, is something that's really impressive, and that I just buy for him at this point that he's able to generate so many paint touches. And
Yeah.
that's something that is needed within current offense, and especially within the Nuggets situation.
Yeah, well, if you could jump to the playmaking, which is you could just jump to the like 11-minute mark. The thing that stood out, and you see it even more in the playmaking reels, is that he is consistently touching the paint,
Right.
just like always, and consistently collapsing the defense.
Mhm.
And either getting all the way downhill, and he's able to make some pretty good interior passes, or obviously being able to kick out from 3 and create easier shots for his teammates. But the fact that he's again able to get 2 feet in the paint, like from the perimeter, like Denver just does not have somebody who can do that consistently. So I completely understand where like the impulse is for this particular pick. Let's actually go to let's jump to the defense. If you could go to like almost the 17-minute mark, Will. He's pretty pesky at the point of attack, and he's really good at getting low. The thing that would concern me, and it kind of applies to both ends of the floor, but I think the questions from teams will probably come mostly defensively, is what indicates to you that what he's doing can translate to the next level, given the clearly pronounced size limitations. Like, if they're listing him at 6'2", he's probably shorter than that. And that's where it becomes, that's kind of the edge of like, are you going to be like an every night backup, or are you going to be like a third string guy that comes in for March basketball potentially?
Right. I think it's definitely a question.
In terms of like his ceiling for Denver.
Right. That's the thing with is Murray still going to be on the team next year? That's partially some of the calculus there, but I do think you could play next to Murray as a guy who can attack off of if they're running pick and rolls. But I think even Murray playing off the ball, like you can play him as a catch and shooter next to Okorie breaking the paint, and just his output like is pretty historic as far as like him able to get to the rim with that many 240 attempts with that amount of unassisted makes. Is something that's pretty rare as far as a guard prospect, and he's just so quick end to end, especially in the half court as well. His specialty is splitting pick and rolls. I think he brings a lot of the offensive kind of creation ability with his quickness and his speed and his physicality that I just buy that's going to translate. Again, especially with that usage percentage, probably not, but I have a lot of regret on Okorie just because I think that the offense is going to be that dynamic.
Okay.
And
So
I think
where
the defense could be
would
problematic, but
how would you compare him to like Reed Shepherd?
I think Okorie is better than Reed Shepherd as far as an offensive prospect.
Okay.
Reed was not a guy who was really like self-creating a lot of makes. Like Okorie is like his profile,
But he had like the prolific shooting was what propelled him. Yeah.
Yep. But I think that comes with, Reed was more of like he could handle as far as like pick and roll usage a bit, but he's someone who's getting targeted defensively. And then I don't think that the skill set offensively is being a lot more playing off the ball, where Okorie is someone who has a lot more of a self-created profile than what Reed brought to the table.
Just looking up right now. Okorie also shot 83% from the line, so his shooting has like more room to grow potentially. The 3-point shooting does.
Yep.
From that, 35%. All right. Oh, I had like a question, an alternative here. What if Denver traded Cam Johnson for like Walter Clayton and like some bad pick? I haven't looked at like what the Grizzlies like pick arsenal is right now, but I know you really liked Walter Clayton Jr. last year, and you probably like Okorie more as an offensive prospect, is my guess. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
So you would probably prefer Denver get Okorie if he's available than trading Cam for Walter Clayton Jr. and like a pick.
What would the pick be? Another first rounder, or?
Yeah, it'd be like another first rounder, or maybe like an early second. I haven't actually looked at what picks the Grizzlies have available. Actually, here's what it wasn't a pick, is what I had in mind was Walter Clayton Jr. and like salary filler. So if let's say the Denver actually wouldn't do this because it wouldn't save them any money, but if they traded Cam for like Walter Clayton Jr. and Santi Aldama, that would be great. That's like the ideal that probably Memphis wouldn't go for. But if it was who else is on the left on the Grizzlies roster? They've changed so much. But just like another kind of bench rotation guy is what I was thinking, like Walter and like a bench guy.
KCP.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah. That'd be funny. That doesn't save Denver any money whatsoever, so they would absolutely not go for it. But that would be incredibly funny if that's how they got KCP back. All right, let's move on then. The next pick you've got here is Dailyn Swain. Will, if you could bring up Dailyn's film here. 20 years old, wing out of Texas, and he was at Xavier before that. 6'8", 225 pounds, 6'10" wingspan. The thing that immediately stands out is that this kid is springy as hell with like an insane hang time. Like, I think he would immediately become like at worst the second most athletic player on the team. He's not fast, but clearly a vertical athlete. And there was a wide range of comps for him, and I don't think any of these actually do justice to his athleticism. But the offensive play style, I think, actually matches here. We've got Denny Avdia, Will Barton, Kelly Oubre. Where there's these skilled perimeter based forwards. And as you can see from the scoring tape here, he can create a variety of shots out of pick and roll. Very comfortable, really good at creating really just being really crafty with his angles to get downhill in a non-traditional way. So like I said, he isn't fast, but he's able to kind of not knife through the defense, but like butter knife through the defense, if that makes sense. And I'll let you take it from here in terms of what you think he can contribute to Denver.
Yeah, I think with Swain, he's been floated around as this is the Watson replacement if Watson were to leave in free agency. But with Swain, he had such an impressive leap this year as a creator. 6'7", 6'10" wingspan. Just the body control, the skill, flexibility for a guy that size that can handle like that is pretty rare. He's someone who can operate against switches. 64% at the rim on 17% assisted. So he was doing a lot of the bulk of the creating for Texas because they didn't really have like a self-creating point guard. And he excelled at his role. 82% free throw shooter for his career. So that kind of gives me a bit more optimism that he'll be able to shoot. He had a true shooting percentage of 63.3, which is good. 40%.
I mean, that's very good for college, no?
Yep. 48% on non-rim twos on 5.1% assisted. I think his defense slipped with his usage that it went up, but I mean, that's kind of we see that with everyone where you have that much responsibility on one end of the floor and the other side is going to slip. But I do think when his usage is scaled down, he'll be able to become more of a, I don't know, a perimeter stopper, but a plus wing defender on that end of the floor. So again, this is like the skill set that if Denver was playing like at the 2, like if you go Murray, Swain, Watson, right? Like that's something where it's like more so of you have guys now who can create off the bounce themselves a little bit. And you kind of look at the construct of that roster where you see more two-way, you see a bit more two-way ability, but the offense is more so it's not just relying on Murray and Jokic to create. You can have Swain step in and you can have Murray play off the ball. So with Okorie and Swain, I'm kind of looking at more so of like targeting guys who can handle usage offensively
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
play a bit more
It's
on
not just
the
like the
ball or off the
ability to
ball.
create, but guys who can actually handle usage and have demonstrated an ability to handle usage. That's a really good way of looking at it, because you could have lots of prospects that show like flashes of like, oh, like I created something once or twice in a game ever, but I'm not really actually used to handling the ball and like creating offense in any way
Right.
necessarily.
That's the big
Um,
thing with like with my evaluation for
yeah.
Denver's prospect, like in Okorie and Swain's perspective is like, can these guys eat usage compared to like just Murray and Jokic doing the bulk of the lifting offensively?
And I
I
think
think
Denver
that's
has
like a necessity.
traditionally looked for guys who just are comfortable not having usage because they
Right.
have so many players playing so much off the ball, to the point where they almost don't care if a guy like hasn't had experience taking on usage. And I think that that has been to their detriment to this point. I really love these defensive clips because um, he's a lot quicker on his feet than I would have expected for somebody his size. He has really good hands, especially off the ball.
Mhm.
Not necessarily pesky, like at the point of attack, but the off ball defense, especially. I don't know if we're there yet, but Will, if you could skip to like the 22, almost 22 and a half minute mark, it's just him like constantly being exactly where he needs to be off the ball to either get deflections or steals, just completely reading the offense and being opportunistic. I think the other thing that people sort of miss, and this is a combination of scheme and personnel when it comes to the question of Denver's very conservative approach defensively, is the you don't have to only generate steals by gambling on the ball, right?
Right.
There are lots of ways to generate steals in a defense, and lots of ways to play aggressively defensively without playing haphazardly defensively. And I feel like getting more players that have a really good nose for just like reading a play and knowing where to be, knowing where the ball is going to go, is another way that Denver could drive up their steal rates. And even if it's not steals, it's like deflections, and like good things will happen as a result of that, without you necessarily doing the thing that like apparently everybody is so afraid to do, which is like you can't gamble at the point of attack on a Jokic team. What would happen? It's like maybe we'd give up a bunch of layups that we already did this year. Um, but I love the off ball defense for him for sure. And I love the opportunistic nature. Not like, yeah, like I said, you don't have to just create those opportunities. My question is, why is he someone who has the possibility of falling to 26? Because even though I have concerns about the playmaking, I don't think it's that impressive to me for even for the wing position. Like he's able to make some passes. The processing time is not like what I would see with compared to some of the other guys even that you have on this list that aren't even necessarily in high usage like playmaking roles. But he's a young wing with a very polished scoring arsenal, good size, and he seems like a good defender, both one-on-one and a team defender is like what I know about this. Why would he fall to 26 in the first place? Like what's wrong with him?
Probably the like as far as the usage is concerned, like is he going to assume this much usage in the NBA? And the answer is probably not. Because then you would be banking on him being like a tier, like a top tier kind of like creator type that can like run an offense and things like that. And more so, like I think his additive usage is more of like a compliment, which is very valuable to what he can bring to a team. But I think with the 3-point shot is probably the biggest concern. Even though he shot around 34% from three, only on 86 attempts. So as far as like his versatility in the pick and roll is concerned, like he's not willing enough, I think, to take enough threes, especially out of pick and rolls, like a pull up guy. We saw one there, but like the volume, I think, is where teams maybe who just play his drives and dare him to be more of a pull up shooter as a catch and shoot guy if he's playing off the ball. So, and I think honestly his defense really took a big step back this year just because of the usage, but that was probably maybe two of the concerns if you were to slide that far.
Well, you know what team hates taking threes? Like, although Denver's 3-point rate did go up a lot this past year under Adelman. I think they were close to average, which is a huge jump for them because they were 30th there the year before. You talked about him being potentially the if Peyton Watson walks kind of replacement. It's different. Like it would just be different, skill sets.
Right.
But if Denver were to take him and not maybe only get rid of one of the wings, whether it was Peyton, Christian, Cam, what unique qualities does Dailyn add to the existing wing room? Is it really just the offensive creation? Not just, because I think that's a big thing, but is there anything else that sort of stands out in terms of what unique things he brings to the current, wing rotation that Denver has?
I think his ability to touch the paint for sure. He had a 52 free throw rate this year. So like someone who's like willing to like drive into the paint and draw free throws. Like a lot of the Nuggets guards really aren't like huge free throw drawers. I mean, Murray maybe a little bit was increased on that end of the floor this year as far as like getting to the line. But I just think it gives the Nuggets more of an offensive baseline where you have a guy who's willing to drive as much as he is and able to kick out the shooters. You can play him on the ball with Jokic and run pick and roll with him. You can play him off the ball as a cutter. You can run second side action. Like I just would really appreciate kind of his skill set next to Murray and Jokic, just a different kind of look compared to what we've seen in the past.
Okay. Let's move on to Zuby Ejiofor next. Well, if you could cue that one up. So Zuby is 22. He's a forward center out of St. John's. CTU and I have been talking about Zuby since last year.
Yep.
6'9", 245 with a 7'2" wingspan. 34-inch standing vertical, which is pretty damn good for somebody his size. And I think my favorite comp for him was Montrezl Harrell. That got that one from NBA DraftNet. In terms of the scoring, he's a rim runner. He's got some polish in his post moves. He's a very willing shooter, or at least a relatively willing shooter for the position. And he's pretty good at driving closeouts. But he's been mostly playing center from what I can tell. What would Zuby's offense look like at power forward?
It's an interesting question. I think with Zuby is that this year he had a lot more usage. Patino ran the offense through him as their center. And he's a guy who's really improved his passing this year, is, making decisions, whether it's off a live dribble or just, stationary as well. If we're talking like specifically Denver, he would operate a little bit in the dunker spot. You can play him 5 out as well, where his jump shot's respectable now. And he really, really improved. Like we're seeing now, like he's attacking from like the top of the key at like off closeouts, and he's got his stride length as far as getting to the paint in like one dribble is really, really impressive. And someone with that level of physicality and the footwork that we see as well, he's someone that you can play at the 4 and the 5. Even though for the 5, I think he'll be a bit undersized, but he does make up for that with his motor and his physicality. So I think adding him to like Denver's front court would be something that is not part of their current skill set right now. Like they don't have a guy who's that physical, who plays with that much of a motor. And I think he's gotten a lot more skilled offensively as a passer and someone who can handle the bit as far as attacking closeouts and that end of the floor. Like him and Deron Holmes, I think would be an awesome bench pairing together. You have Zuby kind of guarding more of the physical 5s with his physicality. You can play both guys in a 5-out offense, and I think you could switch a lot more as well. Like Zuby as a switch defender is like he's someone, especially last year in St. John's run, where they had a lot more perimeter defenders. You know, they had Kadari Richmond, they had RJ Lewis. Like Zuby was the linchpin guy where you can switch 5 out. Like they didn't switch a lot more 5 out this year compared to last year, just because of their guard personnel.
Yeah.
But I think with Zuby, like he gives you the option where Denver used to run a lot of 5 out switching in their championship year. And they kind of stopped doing that. But, I mean, they still do with the bench here and there, but I think with Zuby at the 5, and if you're playing with Duran, I think that'll be something where he kind of adds to Denver's lack of athleticism, but also their physicality deficit as well.
Yeah. On the defense, well, if you could jump to like the 24.5-minute mark, 24:30, I think he competes really well against wings on the perimeter. I kind of wonder like whether the foot speed will translate, but at least at the college level, he looks really good on these switches. And as for the playmaking, he really likes an interior bounce pass. That's like a favorite of his. He really likes to, pass to cutters. He seems like someone who's like willing to take risks as a passer, but I would wonder about the mistakes. He's at like a 3.5 assists to 2.1 turnover guy, which is like not great. But probably I would probably be more confident in his playmaking translating than Dailyn Swain's playmaking because he seems to be a quicker processor.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with Zuby is that I want to ask you if this is a fair assessment. He doesn't have any like major standout athletic traits relative to NBA talent and relative to some of the other players that you showed me in terms of like an upside play, but he looks like he's got a decent chance of like being able to do at least a little bit of everything, if not like a little bit of like a few important things. And Denver just kind of needs a competent big, whether they're going to play forward or backup center. Is that a fair assessment of like how you kind of see Zuby relative to the other prospects that you've got in this range for Denver?
Definitely. I think with Zuby, it's a lot of the straight line speed. He's just very quick off a first jump.
And I do see what you were saying earlier about the stride length. Like that in particular does stand out on his drives.
He's made like for as far as like his offensive profile is concerned, like I think he's more of like a wing and a big body as far as his offense, is concerned. Even though he's like really good as far as attacking mismatches as well. Like I think if you get him on like a small on him, he's going to bury him in the post, like just like Quaintance as well. Like I think that'll be, something that they can bank on offensively. But with Zuby, it's the physicality combined with the motor as well as the wingspan that I think defensively he's going to be able to play the 4 and the 5 for a good amount of matchups. Just someone like that's that physical and that quick is pretty rare for a guy like with his archetype. And I think too, like I think there will be a bit of limitation as far as guarding like bigger centers for sure, but just the physicality aspect is he's going to be able to bump guys off their spot pretty far away from the hoop. So I think defensively, that's where I think he'll be really good on that end of the floor. And then his jump shot really improved this year as well.
The thing that really stood out, by the way, about all of the bigs that were on your kind of your draft board for Denver is that they're all huge. I'm like, what are they feeding these kids these days?
Denver could get like a physical big in this class. Like if they look at like if they trade up for a Yaxel, if they target Zuby, or if they or Quaintance, like there's going to be guys there who would like increase their physical deficit and their athleticism deficit as well. And in Zuby and Quaintance's case, like both those guys are really fast. I think Denver just needs a lot more straight line speed. I know that's something that you had brought up, prior.
All right. Well, if you could bring up the next one here, Koa Peat. So this is a player who I want to ask you about because he's not on your list, but Koa has actually been mocked to Denver by Jeremy Woo over at ESPN, and there have been, rumors of Denver being very interested in Koa. 19 years old, power forward out of Arizona, 6'8", 240. Again, what are they feeding these children? 6'11" wingspan, 35-inch standing vertical, insane. He's very springy with pretty good hang time, but he's not on your draft board for Denver, CT. So my question is, why do you hate Koa Peat?
Definitely don't hate Koa Peat, but I do think that Denver, as far as that range is concerned, there's prospects that I think are more additive as far as what Denver lacks. Uh, like a Zuby, I think a physicality perspective on a Koa is as well. But I think Zuby is a better passer than Koa.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone who's more versatile offensively as an inside outside option. Quaintance, I think, just as far as defensively, is just an outlier compared to Zuby and Koa. And so that's why I have him higher there. Um, with Pete, it's more so like the lack of a 3-point jump shot, which I think is problematic. And we're seeing like in these a lot of his offenses, like big man production, like catching lobs, being a play finisher around the rim. And he does have a bit of like a mid-range jump shot and able to kind of
He loves a post fade. That
right.
was a big note for me. Is he loves a kind of turnaround post fade midi. Like that's like he loves AG's favorite shot.
Yep.
They don't always go in. But he really likes to go to that. That was kind of concerning for me. As I was like, I wasn't expecting to see this as often as I am, given your role.
Yep. I think in comparison to like Quaintance is way quicker off the ground. I think he's a better passer than Koa, I think, too. It's more so like I think Koa could defend in some actions as a switch defender, but as far as like a rim protector is concerned, I kind of
yeah. He definitely doesn't stand out defensively compared to the other bigs on the list. Would you be disappointed if none of the other prospects that you had for Denver at 26 were available and they took Koa?
Probably like him or Jefferson or Joshua Jefferson are like right after who I have on the list.
Okay.
Would I be disappointed? I would probably, if like those guys were off the table by now, I probably would look to trade the pick at that particular point. But I mean, I would be like okay with it, but I wouldn't be ecstatic.
Okay. All right, let's move on to what it would look like, or what CT would like it to look like if Denver were move up into the late lottery, early 20s range. First name that you've got here was really interesting to me. And tell me if I'm pronouncing this name right. Labaron Philon?
Labaron
Philon. Okay. Labaron Philon. 20 years old, guard out of Alabama. Listed at 6'4", 185 with a 6'6" wingspan, 31-inch standing vert. In terms of comps, honestly, not the play style, but kind of the way he moves really reminded me a lot of Bones Hyland. Just his particular kind of fluidity. But some of the actual play style comps were DeJounte Murray and Dennis Schroeder. I actually think he's a much better playmaker than any of the comps that I saw for him.
I agree.
In terms of his scoring, he was on 22 points per game last year on 50, 40, 80 splits. So very efficient with a highly varied scoring arsenal, as you can see from this reel here. There's no one area of the floor that I would say he specializes in. So just a very, very crafty player. Advanced use of fakes, very polished footwork, can break down defenders kind of one-on-one off the dribble. Who knows if that, in particular translates to the NBA, but he also knows how to effectively use screens and pick and roll to create driving lanes. My question on the scoring front is really like, is he a good off-ball shooter? But I actually wanted to drive our discussion about this player into or kind of have it playing over his playmaking reel. Will, if you could jump to the 20-minute mark of this, because this was the part of the reel where I'm like, I'm very impressed with this player. He is such a quick processor with really strong passing creation skills. Really like heads up. I both in transition and in the half court, like kind of always kind of keeping his head on a swivel when it comes to this stuff.
That was a sick pass.
And he's a pretty good passer when he's like caught in traffic. But I'll let you take it from there, because I really was kind of like, I don't know necessarily that this is who I would move up for until we got to the playmaking section.
Right. And with the scoring, I think is like he leverages the scoring with the playmaking.
Yeah.
But just some of the numbers that he was able to improve upon this year. Like as you see, he's someone who's really adept at playing off of 2 feet, 3 level scorer. Really adept at ball screen reads, as a scorer and a passer. Great as far as dislodging with using both hands. He was at 66% at the rim on 172 attempts, only 15% assisted. So kind of like the theme here that I'm going with the board is that players who can make and generate their own offense without being set up.
And in particular, getting to the rim on their
And getting
own.
to the rim, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because so much of Denver's current rim shot creation outside of Jokic is like assists on cuts, and it's like highly reliant on assisted shots.
Right.
Our rim kind of shot diet as a team.
That's why I think the shot diet needs to, if it were to change, it would have to be an addition of the personnel. He doubled his points per game this year, 40% from three on 203 attempts. Just really, really skilled as far as like deception, as far as his passing is concerned. His setups in the pick and roll, like for rejects, and he has like a good mid range game too. So he's someone who's a 3 level guy, not just someone who is getting to the rim, but he's got like the full package offensively. And like you said with the passing, is that like sometimes I think with players it's more so like your scoring is so good that that's kind of like a product of it is just the passing, but like
Yeah.
he's actually someone who's like a proactive, manipulative passer,
Yeah.
especially on the interior as well. Like when he breaks the paint, like and for kickouts or for lobs or just like no look passes, like he's someone who's really able to like generate good offense. And I think that's for the Nuggets case in particular, is that's what they need.
Yeah. And Will, if you could jump to the defense, which I don't have a great timestamp for, you could just jump to the 30-minute mark. His screen recovery is like really, really good. Of any prospect I've seen, out like your list or any of the other draft prospects I've looked at, and I haven't looked at a lot of point of attack defenders. To be fair, I've been looking a lot more at big wings and bigs. But I looked at that and I was like, he would instantly become our best screen navigator because of how well he recovers around screens. He's another one who I think is pretty opportunistic when it comes to generating steals. And I don't think he actually takes that many risks, at least from what I've seen, but he's opportunistic. Where he's like, oh, there's a like semi loose ball. Let me like put myself in position to turn it into like an 80-20 ball for me. I will say the size is concerning to me, particularly the weight, especially early on in the NBA. What would you see his as his ceiling in Denver, given the play style, honestly? And what do you see as like we've actually already talked about this. The essential add he brings to Denver is just on ball creation and the fact that he can both create his own shot. And in particular, he's really good at creating shots for others, at least at the college level.
Right.
I think is the essential add. But what would you see his ceiling as in Denver, given the factors like the skill set and the measurables, which right now are probably the most concerning part?
Right. I think the definitely the weight is concerning, but he does play physical though, as far as like his play style is concerned. Like it's dislodging. He plays a physical style, even though the profile is not as far as someone who would appear like that. In Denver, I mean, it all depends if Murray's still here, because then he's going to get a lot more, I think, of an opportunity to play more on the ball. But as someone who's operating as a catch and shoot guy, I think he can run the bench offense as well. Like if you give him a lob threat, I think that would look really nice. I think he has an all-star ceiling. I think he's going to be really, really dynamic as far as like his scoring package is concerned. But it comes down to like, is his team actually going to give him the keys to the offense, and he's going to be able to you build kind of your offense around him and his strengths. But I mean, in Denver, probably like a second guard. It's like I said with Murray, it depends if he's still there. But
I think it'd be really funny if they traded Jamal and finally got a lob threat after he's gone.
Yeah, that's another skill set to add to the list is the lob threat, the miss of a lob threat off their bench as well. That kind of factors into the double big angle.
Yeah. All right. The last name that you of the original list you sent me, we've got 2 more names here. Is Morez Johnson. He's a 20-year-old forward out of Michigan. He was at Illinois before that. 6'9", 250. My God. 7'4" wingspan with a 34-inch standing vertical. Some of the comps I saw, I liked the Daniel Gafford comp, I think, from NBA DraftNet. In terms of the scoring, this kid's a dunker. And you can see in like there are going to be certain clips here. Like he's really comfortable when he has really deep post position. He's pretty patient in that situation. But it doesn't seem to be a huge part of his scoring arsenal. Will, if you could actually jump to the 11:40 mark of the video for playmaking here. He's actually got pretty good playmaking versus doubles, and he seems to draw doubles a fair bit because of how good he is when he's deep in the post. And can make some quick reads in zone situations, but I have a feeling that this particular prospect isn't on your list for Denver for the offense.
Right. I think his offense actually really improved this year compared to last year. He was at Illinois, so he transferred to Michigan, and then they, won the national championship this year. But he was at 13-7 this year on 34% from three. Not really that many attempts, limited sample size there, but top 20 in box plus minus on the year in the country. I just think defensively he's going to be able to play a variety of different coverages that Denver needs, whether that's in drop, someone who could protect the rim. Pretty switchable as well, one-on-one when guarding in space. And then at the rim this year is at 73% at the rim and had 50 dunks. So he's just someone who's just going to completely dominate the paint, and especially playing off of Jokic's gravity. I just think that'd be such a dynamic combo. But offensively, he did kind of improve his ability to handle like off of closeouts. Nothing like too substantial, but something where I think it's going to be additive as far as his offensive game is concerned. So I actually think he's going to improve his jump shot as he gets into the league. Again, he's not a volume shooter, but a guy I think can operate as a pick and pop guy and then improve some of his attacking ability there. But yeah, you're drafting Morez more so for the defensive potential. And he's someone who, like in these clips, you see a lot of like he's able to dominate against switches as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Against smalls. Like if you get him on a switch, he played with Mara, who was probably going to go in the top 10. So like Michigan played like an NBA sized wing rotation this year with the Yaxel 6'9", Morez 6'9".
I noticed I'm like, wait, these guys were all in Michigan together. That seems really tough to go against.
Yep. Yep, and it was. But yeah, I think with Morez, it's the defense first and then the offense will catch up. But defensively as an eraser type, I think he's going to be dynamic.
Yeah, the thing that did really stand out to me was his ability to not just hold up on switches, like you said, like dominate switches. And I think he really sits down when he guards on the perimeter. I was kind of like, would he even fit in Denver? Like,
they're all high motor guys. So like Quaintance high motor, Zuby high motor, Morez high motor. Like Denver needs guys who are just willing to do stuff like that.
Yeah, I love this clip here.
And he plays with the physicality as well. That's very dominating.
Yeah. I like how you bring up motor. This is like one of the sort of pillars that Will and I have been trying to nail down on in terms of like what is missing from this team. Like people talk about athleticism, but how effective is it if you're not kind of using it constantly?
Right.
And actually like motor can sometimes take you even further than just like having the athletic trait, depending on how you deploy it. Although it's great when you have both, right? And how motor can sort of it can amplify the traits you have sometimes too. All right, let's move on to the last one. This is a player that you think Denver probably can't get, but he was actually, I think, my favorite out of anybody on the list, and that's probably why you think Denver can't get him. Yaxel Lendeborg, 23 years old, forward out of Arizona. 6'9", 240 with a 7'3" wingspan. Only a 25-inch standing vertical, which was pretty surprising to me. But he's got a pretty good max vertical, so when he's got like that running start. His player comp was funny. This was from the No Ceiling guys having a discussion about him. Referred to him as 6'10 Dillon Brooks, not because of the play style, but because of the he's like an enforcer type, basically, in terms of his kind of emotional role on the court. In terms of the scoring, he shoots as well as the dunks. The dunks are what you're going to see first here, but he's also got a pretty impressive finishing package, I would say. But the shooting stood out because I didn't see the volume of 3-point shooting from the other forwards on the list here. So it definitely stands out. He plays more like a wing in that sense. 37% from three last season. After shooting not poorly the years prior, 35% and 33% in the years before that. So kind of a steady improvement, but it's not like you saw like some dramatic spike where you're like, I don't know if I trust that kind of thing. I was wondering what made him stand out for you among the forwards until we got to the on-ball shot creation. So I don't know if you got to this part already, Will, but yeah, we're already seeing it here. He has some really impressive drives from that don't look like somebody who's 6'9", 240. Like he plays like a, I don't know, 6'6", 220 wing. Yep. Basically in terms of his fluidity of movement and on-ball skill. He's got a pretty tight handle as well for somebody his size. He's just like this very impressive player. And I know you said that he's probably he's probably going to be out of reach for Denver even if they move up. But what would it look like for this guy to fall to the late lottery? Like, how do we make that happen?
I'll say it right now. Like if he's there, like, I don't know, after the lottery, like say he slips out of the lottery, I think Denver should go for the Yaxel. I would trade 26 in Cam to get Yaxel in this class. Most importantly is the age. He's going to be 24 by the season starts next year. And that's he's actually a Jersey guy. He only played 11 games in high school due to he had some like enrollment stuff with like where he was going to JUCO and things like that. And he was a late kind of like late playing the game as well. So he played 11 games in high school, went to 2 years of JUCO, and then went to UAB, and then finally now at Michigan as well. It's going to be the age, and then kind of like teams may think he's like a jack of all trades, master of none type. But for me, I just see someone who's pretty scalable as far as his role. Is that at UAB he played more of a big role as far as like playing more like power forward center. At Michigan, he actually transitioned to be like a full-on wing. Like his usage scaled back. Like if you look at his prior years, he averaged 11 and 10 rebounds at UAB. This year he averaged 6.8, like which is still really good for a wing. Just his ability to not play more on the perimeter, I think, has really kind of helped his translation as far as when he plays in the NBA. 6'9", like 7'3" wingspan. He's not like a great like one-on-one creator, like as far as like shaking players, but he can, like if you need to, like he can run pick and rolls, he can run DHOs, and like he's someone who actually has the ability to handle the basketball. So in Denver's, like as far as their kind of roster is concerned, like he's someone who actually would be additive in that aspect of being able to create various actions offensively and defensively this year. Like they had him guarding like Keaton Wagner in games, like guys who were like point guard types. Like he was guarding those guys on the perimeter, and like not like every possession, but he was someone who they would put on like some of the best perimeter options offensively. But like even seeing here, like he can attack closeouts. Like offensively, he just does a little bit of everything that you need, and he obviously improved his 3-point shot this year as well. So I have Yaxel at 6 on my actual big board. I have him at 6.
Wow, right, that's really that's really good and makes it harder for Denver. If other teams are thinking the same way. Well, if you could jump to the playmaking The thing about his playmaking reel that really stood out is that he's just really good in a wide variety of situations. So pretty similar to the scoring. It
Yep.
made me wonder, and again, it stood out for somebody his size. Did he play point guard growing up?
No, I don't think so, actually. He was pretty tall in high school. Um, but over time, like, he kind of developed into more of a point forward, like point center type at UAB.
Mm-hmm.
He was doing a lot of the creating, making a lot of the decisions on their offense. So, but you would think that as someone like a guy his height, that he's able to make these interior passes. He's a really good lob thrower. Like, him and Mara had a really good connection as a lob threat. Um, but just his ability to get downhill and make a pass like that. Like, I don't think he's like anything like a proactive, like manipulative passer, but
Sure.
someone who makes really, really quick decisions.
Not Philon for sure.
Right. But he's, I think immediately, like, I think his ceiling is going to be like high end starter.
Yeah. Um, I just saw he had a 3-to-1 assist to turnover rate ratio last year, which was like really nice to see. Not three's not super high, but I like to see the low turnovers for that role. That's like
Right.
that's that's at least to the point where it's like, okay, that could be very impressive. I don't like to see a high turnover rate for somebody that has the ball in their hands for just a moderate amount of the time. Defensively, I will say he was probably the least imposing of the like rim protector, like at being a rim protector of the big/forward options, but he was able to still find impact. I think he has really good timing on his blocks, right? And he's really good at blocking shots on the perimeter. Well, if he could jump to the 20-40 mark, it's just a compilation of him like blocking 3-point shots. And he also has pretty good off-ball timing as well. Very opportunistic in like forcing turnovers and all that, which is like another running theme among the prospects that you kind of compiled here, and definitely not what you would expect at that position. I feel like bigs and forwards tend to play more conservatively until you're getting kind of closer to the basket. So that was just like an interesting way to approach defense for that position. Yeah, and I was wondering if that was just another thing that besides like kind of rim defense, which is something that you seem to be very much prioritizing for the forwards, if that was something that stood out to you and kind of not just for Denver, but like that being part of one of the things that drove him so far up your draft board.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's scalable in that aspect where he played a lot more perimeter this year. He played the three for Michigan, but UAB played more of a 4-5. So with that wingspan, like, we didn't see a lot this year in Michigan of him like playing as like a low man role. He was more so like on the perimeter. So I am curious to see now how that would look. But with the wingspan and his athleticism, I think he'll still be really good on that end of the floor. But I think with just Yaxel in general, he just does so much. Like, he's good at like so many things that I just think his output is going to be as a pretty good starter in the league. And even though the age is definitely against him, and that is a factor for sure, like that's definitely a ding to his resume. But I mean, he was able to be like the best player in college basketball this year on a title team. So
I will say one of the things that because I was listening to the No Ceilings guys about Yaxel in particular. He's the only one I did like this kind of deeper dive on besides the film. They were kind of wondering like, man, why wouldn't people pick him like higher up the board? It's not just like drafting the guy and getting him because of the way that the rookie scale contracts work. The further up into the lottery you get, the more like guaranteed money there is on that deal. And even like you said, he's going to project to be like probably like a good starter, like at worst.
right.
But you don't necessarily want to be paying him like $20 million on the like third year of his rookie deal, for example. So that's the kind of thing that I think would prevent him from going as high as like sixth necessarily. But I do think that he would probably go based on like what I've seen in like probably at worst like end of the lottery. I don't think he's falling out of the lottery.
Don't let OKC get Yaxel.
I can't. I can't think about that team. I can't think about their draft stock right now. Anything else that you want to say about any of these prospects? Because we did have a question about someone else that the chat wanted for Denver. One Alan Graves. What do you think about Alan Graves as a potential, quote, huge difference for this is coming from at Nuggets front office.
There they are. Yeah, with Graves, it's he had a pretty unique year being on Santa Clara. He like came off the bench for a good amount of the year as well. Kind of like a late riser in the process. Had like a good tournament game that kind of was like the highlight of his year. Pretty good shooter, is like a pick and pop guy. Defensively has really good tools. Not like a great athlete, but as someone who's like really like I really like his awareness defensively. Combo forward. Not really like too much of a handler type, but will be more so on the defensive end of the floor is where his calling card will be. But offensively, it's pretty good touch. I think he'd be a fine pick. I don't think he's going to be there for Denver, unfortunately, but I kind of prefer like some of the other skill sets in that range. But if they got Graves, I would be happy with that pick if he were to slide to 26 and Denver were to get him. Like I think he would be additive as a forward, but unfortunately, he's not really like taller. Like he's not as physical as like a Zuby type or tall as like a Morez or like a Yaxel. So
you really prioritize that physicality of these like big forwards. Like all of these forwards, I think the smallest one was like 240 pounds listed as, which is I think like Yaxel is the smallest one of the forwards.
Right. Yeah, definitely prioritizing kind of more of a double big look. I mean, in Quaintance's case, he's like less offensively along than the other guys, but defensively, I think he has probably a higher upside defensively.
Yeah, for sure. Well, CT, we held you hostage. We really appreciate you coming back on the show to break down all the draft stuff before you go on any of the other million podcasts that want you. Are you going to be doing anything for draft night, like a live stream or going on live streams?
Yeah, I'll be on Ben Pfeiffer's live stream on draft night. To be determined, like anything Denver related. I'll probably do maybe a show after draft night, depending on what Denver does. But yeah, on draft night, I'll be on Ben's stream. Got a couple Nuggets stuff coming up for podcast before the draft. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Denver does because I think this is like the first kind of point in the offseason of like the direction that they're going to go into. And I'm hoping the Nuggets can get one of the guys on this list. That'd be great. But yeah, thanks, Grace and Will, for having me on the show. Always appreciate you having me on. Great talking Nuggets with you guys. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see.
You are welcome on the show anytime, CT. You're one of our favorite guests. You're one of the chat's favorite guests for sure. I know we have a lot of our chat has a lot of overlap with the other shows that invite you on. Why don't you tell people where they can find you on your socials, your podcast, etc.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at CTFazio24, and I have a YouTube channel, Court Talk with CT, which hopefully will be adding some more content moving forward, but been a bit tough with coaching and regular day-to-day stuff. So hopefully willing to do some more shows coming up. But once again, thanks for having me on the show. Always a great time.
Yeah, of course. And you always have these like really interesting prospects for us to look at that maybe give us some hope for the team moving forward when all hope seems lost.
Yep.
As for everybody watching, if you made it this far, we appreciate you guys the most. You made it through an almost 3-hour stream. I'm sorry, CT, this did not break the record that we have with Matt Brooks.
Wow, he beat me
over from the Nuggets. Yeah, I think we did like a 3-hour 15 something long episode with him once. But you guys are both talkers, and I really appreciate it because it means I get to talk less, even though the chat doesn't think I talk less at all. If you do like our content, please remember to click the like button, hit the subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. leave us a review on your favorite podcast platforms. Follow us on socials so that you don't miss an episode. And always remember that winning is fun and losing sucks. Especially losing the draft, which it almost feels like Denver can't do if they just pick somebody from CT's draft board.